takes about 15.
We are now
Okay,
ready.
I'd like to call the May 2022 regular Mountain Parks meeting of the Board of Directors. And we have a quorum. Jeff Hauk is absent. And do we have any public comment?
We do not. We had talked to a few members that had indicated that they might, but as of yesterday, they hadn't given us any information, so we didn't send anything yet.
Okie dokie. Let's go on to the minutes.
Liz had just pointed out to me on page 3, I think I left in a recess from the previous meeting. So I think the 10:30 recess is correct. And then there's another recess down under action item C that needs to be deleted. Right?
Yeah. Other than that, are there any people reviewed the minutes? Are there any changes, additions? Could I have a motion?
Make the motion to accept the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
That's better.
Oh, I think I forgot mine. Dave. Okay, attorney report.
Should have all gotten my detailed report. Summary report is in here. Oh, the invoice is also in there. Been a busy couple months. I'll have some updates in executive session.
Right, thank you, Levi. Mark, do you have a manager's report?
I
for
do
us?
have a couple of things to talk about.
Just a
Community solar. After we discussed the number of proposals that we received at the last board meeting, we conducted Zoom interviews with 2 of the community solar finalists, Cloudbreak and Pivot, on April 21st. After a final review and the discussion of the Zoom interviews, we selected Cloudbreak to build the project. We met with them on April 29th to discuss next steps. As a result of that meeting, they provided us with a draft PPA on May 6th. The PPA does actually include a performance guarantee that would compensate us if the project fails to produce at least 70% of the projected power delivery. Now, that's not likely to happen, but if that was to happen, then they would pay us the cost of the power that we had to buy from Tri-State. And Levi and I are in the process of reviewing the PPA, and we'll be scheduling a meeting with Cloudbreak to discuss any needed revisions to it. And I expect, if all things go well, that at next month's meeting, we'll have the contract or the PPA for Cloudbreak for the board to review. Pause after each of these if anybody has any questions. Carl.
Pick 70%.
They did because typically with a PPA, we wouldn't have any performance guarantee, but in our discussions, they said, you know, well, we put in a performance guarantee. And I said, okay. And, you know, if we were going to own it and somebody was building it for us, and which we had in the earlier discussions, we were looking at like 98%. But since we don't own it, they own it. They have the risk of building it, operating it, maintaining it, repairing it, and all we do is buy the power. The fact that they were willing to put in the performance guarantee was just, I mean, it wasn't a decision factor in selecting them because at the time we didn't know what it would be. Everybody, including the 2 finalists, they had all the qualifications necessary. They had the experience building, and it came down to price. And so that's how they got selected.
Have you checked around with performance guarantees with the other PPAs or other co-ops that 70% is the industry standard? Or
My experience with PPAs, there typically is not a performance guarantee, and it's because you only pay for what they deliver, unless within the PPA it's a take or pay situation, and this one is not. So when they produce whatever they produce, We would pay only for the kilowatts that they deliver to us. And in this particular instance, if they, for some reason, didn't deliver at that 70%, they would, let's say they delivered at 65, for that 5%, they would pay us for kilowatts that we didn't have to pay them. And so we would get that 5% of power from Tri-State for free because they'd pay us the cost of that power.
Was at Tri-State, and they are very skeptical that a lot of the projects that they got PPAs for will be built because of the shortage of solar stuff and the government looking into China dumping stuff in Vietnam and whatnot. What is Cloudbreak's feeling about them actually doing the project and completing it?
They currently have, I believe it's 8 or 9 pending projects, some with Excel. And I think part of the challenge for Tri-State is that they were able to get some, I'll call it technical term, screaming deals from, and, when they were getting deals that were in the $20 per megawatt, with the changes and some of the stuff that you've identified, people can't build for that $20. And I think that's one of the challenges. This is, I would say, a PPA, which is more market price. And the actual construction would be in 23. So they would start building next year. So they feel very confident that they can get the materials, and the pricing that they put in now is based on the pricing of ordering the materials now. And they think that there's the possibility that some of the costs may go down by summer of next year.
Was this 70% annual based or daily or?
It's 70% annual.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you have a
Daily.
couple of good days and you have some bad days, it does kind of work itself out.
Maybe we'll counter it hourly.
Okay, we could counter with that. I don't think they're going to agree to it, but anything's possible. Last month, we had a member, Micah, and I'm probably going to pronounce his name incorrectly, Marmaro, and he was the owner of the Walden Hotel and wanted to put in some EV chargers. Engineering met with him and spoke to him about what the process is, explained how we go through, what information we would need related to his project. He has not engaged the services of an electrician at this point, so he does not have the information he needs to be able to move forward. What he is talking about is the possibility of putting in and running off of the hotel service a couple of level 2 chargers. But his big thing is he wants to put in the plaza of level 3 chargers, and that would require 3-phase power, which is not there at this point. And he, of course, as requested in the board meeting discussion, is looking for some assistance from Mountain Parks on that financially. And at this point, we told him that, once he figures out the design and gets the information that we need, then he can reconnect with us and we can start the conversation about the build. So pausing for a moment. Seeing no questions. The FERC CTP process. The hearing began on May 3rd. That happened to be the day that I had flown in the night before and was in Denver. So on the drive up, I listened to the hearing on my phone, and I'm happy to report that telecommunications works all the way over Berthoud Pass. I didn't lose it the whole time. And it started with the judge hearing United and NRPPD's motion to strike a group called the Indicated Members, and it is Highline, Casey Electric, Midwest Electric, Morgan County, Poudre Valley, Southeast Colorado, and White River, had filed at the last moment an alternative methodology to be considered without any supporting testimony or witnesses. So United filed its motion to strike that and not allow it. The discussion of that lasted for 2 hours. And with all the parties going back and forth, the judge rejected United and NRPP's motion to strike and allow the participation of the indicated members. Basically, the new methodology that was filed was a methodology that Cooter Valley had proposed in settlement discussions. And they indicated that they didn't need to have witnesses to support it because what they were doing was taking issue with what they refer to as very minor
5 minor.
items within the testimony of other witnesses, the Tri-State, United, and others. So that moved forward. On May 11th, so yesterday, United filed a motion to file limited supplemental testimony. And the testimony is in response to the indicated members filing. And they are providing some testimony, and they would like the ability to cross-examine based on the indicated members. The judge scheduled an oral argument for today. It actually started about 10 minutes ago. And the hearing is supposed to end on Friday. Based on the pace, I don't anticipate that it will actually end on Friday. So it is ongoing, and once they finish, then the judge will probably take 60 days or so to issue her order, which will then go to the commission for their approval, modification, or rejection. So I will pause there for a moment.
What they do with the COVID issue.
They had, I think, Tri-State and some of the other participants had asked to do in person. And so they are in person. And I know where you're going. So, but everybody that was attended in person had to be vaccinated or show a negative test within a certain period of time. They had one of the attorneys, and I believe she is the attorney for United, part of their team tested positive. And my understanding is that she basically is not there, but the rest of the team, and she can attend virtually as well. Because that's how the parts that I have been able to watch, that's what I've done is watched it virtually. What I will tell you is it's the judge. I mean, you can hear everybody but the judge.
Oh, no.
And all the lawyers, you can hear what they're saying. It's not a problem, but the judge, she is so soft-spoken that you can't hear. And they have worked on the microphones and stuff to try and come up with something, but it's not the best at this point. So moving on to partial requirements. The deadline, as we mentioned last board meeting, for partial requirements application is tomorrow at 5 p.m. The agenda includes a discussion item for the board to discuss and possibly approve a Mountain Parks application for partial requirements. I have completed the application, which it is 1 page, so it's not that difficult. And Stacy has the wiring instructions for the possible fee that we would pay for the 20 megawatts, which is $25,000. And the application does allow for us to put in what we want, so 20 megawatts, but to provide a floor so that if for some reason there's 97 megawatts that is available. So if, for instance, they ended up with 150 megawatts of request, you can put in a floor. So you will take something less than the 20 megawatts, or you can put in as the floor the 20 megawatts. So that's something when we get to that action item that the board can discuss is we've picked the 20 megawatts for a specific reason. And we have the ability, though, to take something less than 20. I received the term sheet and documents from our alternative power supplier for the 20 megawatts. Levi and I are in the process of reviewing those documents. The primary terms that we discussed at the last meeting significantly price and the length of the term. and the methodology under which they would give us the stuff are consistent with what we discussed last month. Some of the terms, such as delivery points, will require input from Tri-State. I know with La Plata, I talked with Jessica Matlock, their CEO, last week, that they have begun conversations, and I'm sure San Miguel and Cooter have as well, to identify specifically what it is, because those, it's not part of the application, but in order to be able to get the contract or PPA with the alternative power supplier, you're going to have to have all of those things. And with La Plata, they have had Crossover, who is providing theirs as well, be part of those discussions with Tri-State so they can figure out all of the nuts and bolts of how the agreement would work. And this was a reminder that I put in for myself. Just because we asked for 20 megawatts doesn't mean we will get 20 megawatts, doesn't mean we would necessarily get anything. But we would most likely, as I said, if there's 150 megawatts of request and they have 97, then you're going to get potentially 2/3 of what you need. What that means, of course, is if somebody says, no, I will only take what I'm asking for, and they don't get that, then they would drop out, and then potentially you would get everything you wanted. Let's see. That's
Remind me about the 25,000. If we decide not to do it after we apply, is that forfeited?
my understanding in reading the documents related to it. If there's a couple, the answer is it depends, but if we.
That's Levi's.
Yeah, if we end up asking for it and we pay them the $25,000 and they give us something less than what we are wanting, then the $25,000 should be refundable to us. If we ask for 20 megawatts and they say, we can give you 20 megawatts, and as we're going through the process, we don't like how stuff works out either on the tri-state side or with the power supplier, then we would forfeit that $25,000.
I did have a different answer to that one.
Oh.
Maybe.
See, because he uses that legal terminology.
Yeah, I had to make sure I had my value.
Any other questions on partial requirements? Well, as I said, it's a discussion item, so. And when we get into the discussion item, if there are specific questions about some terms, things like that, we can have a discussion in executive session, because I think at this point, we are not at the juncture that we would want to disclose any of the information that's included in the term sheet. It's still covered under an NDA, so. Okay, a fiber update. I believe there's some of this that's in Scott's report as well. The phase 2 contracts are being reviewed. Some of them are in process. The construction contract will be added under emergency business for the board to review and possibly approve this today. We got it, Scott, on Monday.
Yeah.
And we had gone back and forth with them a little bit because they had some items in it that we took issue with. And we sent it back to them after Levi provided comments and language for them. And they accepted everything, all the changes that we wanted them to make to it. And so it is ready for the board to look at, and it is a $1.8 million contract. And it would be for phase 2. Phase 1 will, the ADB, who is the contractor working on that, and Altitude have begun work again. And we expect that that will be done in the next couple of months. Altitude was doing the make ready, so moving lines and replacing poles if necessary. And ADB is actually doing the work of stringing the fiber, either aerially or underground. We met with Connexon to discuss fiber to the home, as you recall from some of our discussions over the last couple of months at the board meeting. We had somewhat given them a deadline or ultimatum, if somebody would say, that we needed to know what they were going to do, because otherwise we would go out for an RFP to see if other people were interested. They provided us an overview of the financial assistance that's available, including loans and grants. And as a recipient of RDOF funds for our service territory, there are some of those, whether it's loans or grants, that are only available to them in our service territory. They reaffirmed their desire to build out the fiber to the home to 100% of our members and to lease our fiber backbone in order to do that. They have filed an application with RUS for funding and received notification that the application is being processed. They told us on the call they don't know what that means or how long it will take, but it is in process. Simultaneously, they are working on private placement funds. And the difference, of course, is RUS's money is much cheaper, but has a lot more strings. The private placement costs a little bit more, but they don't care what you do with it. So they are looking to see which of those comes through first. And they indicated that they could begin construction within 30 days of funding approval, whether RUS or private placement. And that the construction timeline is between 12 and 18 months to complete the fiber to the home. Now, there may be parts of our service territory where it goes beyond 18 months, but the bulk of the service territory and what I will refer to as the population centers / towns, they could finish within that time frame. We have requested a template lease from them to review, and we'll work with our fiber council to identify any revisions that we need. This is a standard lease that they have used with other co-ops, including Mountain View. But most of those co-ops they originally chose the option 1 or 2, where they invested in or funded the construction. We are not doing that. And so they said they would need to modify it a little bit. But I pinged Jonathan Chambers yesterday because I was supposed to have it by now and I don't. And so we will wait to see what they come back with. And I assume that we will probably have some changes to it and send it back to them.
What happens if they don't get the funding they're looking for
They,
from either RUS or private placement? Would that stop this, or?
I would say that is extremely unlikely. They will get funding from somebody. The private placement, we have talked with them about that. That is not something, I mean, they've got that pretty much lined up. So the question is whether or not they want to do it with the private placement or they would prefer to do it with the RUS. And, you know, there are pluses and minuses to both sides of that. And, you know, it's cheaper for them, but, you know, they believe that they can make it work with either funding source. And I think that the answer on the RUS is they will get the funding. The question is when.
And how much is grant versus loan?
Right. And they are also working with the state of Colorado on some programs that they have. And so the money's there. And the loan that they had was 26 or $28 million. 28.5 is what they have asked for from RUS.
And if RUS gives them the money, are there going to be any, I don't know the right word, any scenarios that would impair our ownership of anything? Because they're getting money from RUS. They usually want a security in what they're doing.
And their security for RUS would come in their portion of the fiber to the home.
Okay,
They have no right to anything on our backbone other than if we work out the lease, then they would have a lease. But RUS would never have any interest
Okay.
in our backbone.
You mentioned 100% to the home.
Yep.
Does that mean every meter that we service?
Every member that we
There's no
service,
exclusions because they're 40 miles away from And the only one or anything like that?
That is the statements that they have made, the promises, is that it would be to 100% of our members. Yes,
That want it.
that want it, yeah.
Yes.
As
Yeah, they're not gonna build
Yeah.
40 mile.
they're going to, go through and for instance, they'll probably start in Winter Park. And they'll go through there and they will build out certain facilities. And then as they're doing that, they're going to be trying to sign people up. And if they get to Fraser and Kristen and Dick did not want it, they're not going to put it to their house. They may come back later and do that, but it is obviously a lot more cost effective to do it as they build it out. That's true.
And phase 2 will complete
Before the end of the year.
backbone.
Yes. Yeah,
Our
our part, so the backbone that we need to service everything that we have will be done by when phase 2 is completed at the end of the year.
In areas that our backbone does not cover, Laramie River Valley, for instance, is that, I mean, how are they gonna do that? Like, come down to Wyoming?
There are areas of our service territory that are not covered by the backbone, right, Scott?
Well, Laramie River area, and of course, once you get north Park South, there's that one. Beyond that.
Those RDOT funds they
But
got,
that's-
were those areas?
Not Laramie River, but areas outside the backbone, yes.
Yeah, I
like
guess.
Calgary, for
So they have some
example.
money for that.
And Connection has stated that every member, and they were told about Laramie River, and they said they have
Yeah, that's
intention
very
to serve
big.
them.
I mean, that's Jonathan Stick is.
Yep.
Everybody in the rural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Meter by
Deserve
meter,
it.
end to end. System for every consumer that's there. I mean, if there's just a meter servicing
stop
a sign or something like that, it's not
So-
gonna necessarily be.
So there won't be any other providers other than themselves, or they may decide to work with another provider.
They have the ability of, well, right now, they don't have any right to do anything.
Well, they have rights.
Once-
They don't have any right with our backbone.
Right.
They can do whatever they want.
Once we have a lease with them, then the lease would allow them to utilize the backbone to provide the fiber to the home service. What we have told them and what we will expect to see in the lease is that they will allow for open access to their portion of the fiber. And they will be able to charge for that, but they have to do it on a non-discriminatory basis. So basically, whatever they charge themselves, they would have to charge somebody else. So for instance, if, what's, Slopeside Internet wanted to utilize their portion of the fiber to provide services, they would have to charge him what they charge themselves. Now, the challenge comes in for another provider is they're going to have to be competitive with Connexon's offering. And Connexon's pricing is extremely competitive with anything. It's the $49 or $79 a month. And most smaller providers, I don't think even with a great deal on the fiber are going to be able to match that price. I'm not saying that they can't, but I'm just saying that,
What are the speeds at those prices?
what?
What's the speed at the 49, 79?
100 megabits symmetrical, 1 gigabit symmetrical, and now they have a 2 gigabit at 99 symmetrical.
Yeah, so the pricing for those services, when you compare it to like a Comcast, I mean, not even close.
On Eden, I think his high speed's like $80, if I'm not, 79, but his high speed is not gigabyte speed.
Yeah,
So if he tied into our fiber instead of into whoever owns the other fiber that runs along the railroad tracks, if it's, that price is competitive, then his price could be competitive.
possibly, but if, let's say that the $79 for Connexon is 1 gigabit. And if his high speed, if you're saying if it's less than the 100, that's at 49, It's possible he could be competitive. I think it's not likely that he would be competitive.
I think
It just depends on what he has to pay them versus what he's paying
it
someone
seems
else.
like our, as a board, our thought about this is like, we kind of want to allow, we would like that open access provision in there so that there still can be competition in the future. Now, how that all plays out and who wins that battle, that's
That-
not for us to
right,
decide.
Right. And one of the things to keep in mind that the open access is not just for other internet providers.
Right.
So if you had the county, if you have Middle Park Health, and they want to get access, they could get access through Connexon to the fiber to do whatever they want to do to communicate within their system. So it's not just somebody that, happens to own a rival internet company. I would expect that the telcos, the Verizons and AT&Ts and T-Mobiles will potentially utilize some of this bandwidth and for their purposes. So it's not just people that want to provide internet or broadband to the home. It's a number of people that this type of service is going to benefit. Well, a number of companies. The people that have service from them, it may not benefit them as much.
Is there any kind of price differential or saying 100%? So they go, say they go up to Laramie Valley compared to somebody in North Park, are they going to get service at $79 and the guys in Laramie River get for 200?
Nope.
It's supposed to be consistent.
They have, it's kind of like Henry Ford. You can have any color you want as long as it's black. Everybody gets it for $49.
Same as our service bill,
Yeah.
ability charge.
And they have current systems in place with other co-ops, and this is the model. Regardless of where you are, that's what you pay. Mountain View indicated at the CRA managers meeting that they expect to have their first customers on the fiber to the home the 1st of June. Now, they are still having some challenges with some other pieces of it, so they're not going to be 100% probably for some time. But they started the construction and they expect to have it, the first customer on it by the 1st of June. They wanted to have it by the time their board met, but that's not going to happen.
Remind me how this is going to work in areas where our lines are underground. Will they have to dig up and string their?
No, they have the ability to, and Scott, do you want to talk about the undergrounding? When we have undergrounded, there is capacity to be able to put other things in the conduit.
No, they'll dig or bore, but they don't go very deep. So it's not as costly as us. It's more costly than going over it, but it's not as big as differences for us. So they'll trench it or plow it or bore it.
And some of the bearing of the conduit, they've already done in some areas on that end. And I think with a lot of our stuff, it won't necessarily be underground. Once you get into phase 2, most of that's going to be aerial.
The reason I ask is I ran into an issue where, despite calling the locator service, 411, Comcast didn't come out and mark where their lines were. So I was digging a fire pit in the backyard and hit one of their undergrounded lines. They hadn't really done their due diligence and gotten permission to run their lines across my backyard. And I'm just hopeful that when Connexon does this, that they're actually going to be doing it right.
Well, and with most utility lines, electric, gas, water, they're much deeper than what they will be burying their stuff at. And so that should not be an issue. Now, of course, there are always lines that are the responsibility of the homeowner.
Yeah.
And when you have 811 go out and locate, they don't necessarily locate all of those. And so there is that possibility that something like that would happen, but then it's their responsibility to fix that.
Is there any timeline that we're going to put into this deal with Connexon about when they have to complete? I mean, can it go on for 50 years or,
No,
I mean, before they get, you know, they're guaranteed 100%.
I think that what we have not seen the agreement, so we don't know what the agreement is with the other folks, but what I would expect is we will look or talk with them about what their timeline is. And they say 12 to 18 months. So we would want
For
to,
the whole,
for the whole thing. And so what we would want to see is something in the agreement that said, you know,
5 years.
we will give you 3 years, 5 years to complete everything. And, you know, because they told us they could do it in 18 months. But we also don't want them to have the ability to, you know, go on forever.
well, I
providing the
agree,
service.
because they're tying up our backbone for however long it is, right?
Well, they're paying
If
us.
they don't
Yes, well,
produce.
there, for a portion of the
There you go.
backbone, yes, they would have rights to. A portion of it will belong to us
Yeah.
and we'll utilize, and we could, if they fail to, you know, live up to the requirements of the lease, then I think we would have the ability to put into the lease that we could then open up those portions to somebody else.
Yeah.
But also someone else should be able to access it through the open access
Yes,
portion. And the RDOF funds, that those CAF 2 or whatever it was called, those are what, 8 years, 10 years for them to have to,
10 years.
10 years for them to
They
have to provide, by 10 years, they have to
Well,
provide.
the funding is for 10, but they have to show like 90% completion in 8, I think.
Okay,
So when did the clock start ticking on that?
It hasn't, because they haven't taken money yet. There's some dispute on Colorado's money yet.
they cleared up the dispute, so I think they now have access. I don't know if they've taken it. There was a dispute for a discrete portion of Colorado with the Indian tribes, and whether or not, you know, someone could get access to land that they have control of with the RDOF funds. That held up Colorado RDOF funds, and Colorado finally kind of split that piece off. And then the rest of Colorado now has access to the RDOF funds. Okay, moving on. The safety coordinator. We have conducted multiple interviews with 3 candidates. Each time before we have been able to arrange to bring them in for a face-to-face interview, the candidate has withdrawn from consideration. Yesterday, one of those candidates notified us that they would like to now continue the process. And so we are discussing, you know, whether to arrange a face-to-face interview with that individual. There are some questions that need to be answered before we do that, but one of them was actually a local candidate, and so it would have been very easy. They would have just driven here. And at the last minute, they withdrew. And it is not, so far as we know, and what they have told us, an issue of compensation, because we never even got to discussing compensation. In most of the cases, well, 2, they were working for other employers. And when the employer found out that there was a possibility they would lose them, they made them an offer to stay and address some of the concerns that the individuals had. Now, the one who has contacted us was in that position, and after seeing what they offered, decided that he still was interested in looking at another opportunity. The third individual was moving forward. He is retired and wanted to go back to work. And at the last minute, after having discussions with his wife, she decided that he should not be working. So that is why he has withdrawn. So we believe that, you know, we are moving in the right direction, and we've had some very good candidates. It's just closing the deal has been a little bit of a challenge. So no questions on that. So CRE managers meeting was held in conjunction with the first week of Hotline School in Grand Junction on May 4th and 5th. Don Finn presented on the East Troublesome Fire our restoration process, the wildfire mitigation plan, and system hardening. We had a lot of really good discussion with the other co-ops. And we were able to provide them with some resources on things that we have done that they have been looking at, or in some cases they have already done. And so it was a very good discussion. During the managers roundtable, which was the second day, a couple things that came up. CORE, formerly IREA or Intermountain, they let us know, well, they did, Kent Singer let us know that they have given notice that they are leaving CREA membership as well as NRECA membership in September. Kent Singer has reached out to them to try to understand why and see if there was something that CREA could do. They have not responded. Now, it was pointed out that IREA left CREA in the past and came back. So the fact that they have left doesn't necessarily mean they will be gone forever, but at this point, that's what they have indicated. Two cooperatives have named new CEOs. Southeast Colorado, they had an interim CEO. They removed the interim title, and their new CEO is Kevin Brandon. And San Isabel also had an interim CEO, and they removed the interim tag from him, and his name is Ryan Ellerton. He was previously their CFO. And I believe Kevin was operations. And last, Mountain View's board received 90 applications to replace their CEO, Jim Herron. The board is reviewing approximately 40 of those, and they are scheduling interviews with, the number wasn't certain, but probably 6. I believe it's late May or early June. They expect that the new CEO will be in place by July 1st, which is a little bit of a problem because their current CEO's last day is June 30th. So there will be no overlap for that. They have,
co-op was that?
what?
Mountain View.
Mountain View. They have 2 internal candidates, but they have a requirement that the CEO live within the service territory, and neither of them does. And so it is unclear as to whether or not they will actually be considered, or they will ask to be considered, considering the fact that they will have to move, and the area around Colorado Springs is very expensive. So
Change the requirement.
well, no, the board reaffirmed that that's the requirement that they want to go on. There were a number of other things that the board changed as well. And Jim was not overly confident that those changes were going to work real well with the search, but we'll see.
Going back to IRA leaving,
Yes.
does that mean the increase in cost to the rest of us? Because they supplied a huge part of that.
They were about 7 to 8% of the general budget. CREA's budget is divided into general things that they do, and then some things are kind of on a fee for service, I'll call it. And so they are looking at what that means, but I would say that it is likely that there will be an increase in dues. Not in 2022, because their departure will be, and they've already paid. But in 2023, they're going to have to look at, their budget, and if there's a possibility that they can reduce the budget, which I think there is some of that possibility, but probably not enough to cover their contribution. And last thing that I had, co-bank sharing success. MPE applied for a sharing success grant for Mountain Family Center's TOTS program. And you may recall or not that it requires a match, and we put into the 2022 budget the match. And obviously, if we didn't get the grant, then we would not need the match. But program provides students that experience food insecurity during the school year and during summer break, food. And here at most of the schools, what they do, since they go Monday through Thursday, on Thursday, the kids take home the totes with them. So they have food over the weekend. We found out on April 26th that CoBank awarded a grant of $10,000 to Mount Family Center. And we had that amount in our budget. So we will match that. And we'll be presenting the checks to Helen Sedlar, the director, probably on Saturday, but if not on Saturday, next week sometime. And I had sent out a couple months ago, actually, maybe it was last month, some sheets that showed the statistics for what Mount Family Center does. And one of the areas was the TOTS program. They have had the program in place since 2012. And in 2012, when it was initially a pilot program, they gave away 2,400 meals. In 2020, that number was up to 26,000 meals. Well, not meals, totes, which have more than one meal. In 2021, the number dropped a little bit to 24,800. This year through March, they're at 9,000. And they provide the totes in the East and West Grand school districts, as well as the North Park School District. And they do some health and human services at selected libraries and things like that to be able to make sure that they hit all of the people that might need assistance. And with that, I am done. So if anybody has any questions on anything that I've reported on or anything else,
Congratulations. It's a great matching grant.
Yes, and I had lunch with Helen last month, and she said that they are experiencing some struggles at this point with some of the grants that they've gotten in the past every year because of the Marshall Fire, and some of those resources are going in that direction. So they are not able to get those grants, and we're expecting to have a difficult summer with doing the TOTS program. So this actually helps quite a bit.
Excellent. Do people need a break, or should we go into some of the discussion action items that might, the first ones
Well,
might?
we still have the safety report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Yep, good.
if there are no
Let's
other
go into
questions
the
on my
safety
report, you have the safety report. You see that we had no accidents, no incidents, no near misses. There was one damage report between our crews and a CenturyLink line. And then on the second page of the report, you have the safety committee activities, loss prevention, job training, and upcoming training that we have. I will remind the board that this is our year for RESAP. So we will have the other co-ops that come in and do the RESAP. We expect, well, I know when it is, nobody else does. And it will be later this year.
Rural safety, what does it stand?
Rural
for?
electric safety
Achievement Program.
And that's provided through CREA.
It is provided through CREA. We are on a 3-year rotation, and a CREA safety representative, along with representatives from other co-ops, come in, and there is a program. And so we know the areas that they look at, and they go through and they look to see our compliance in those areas. And they give us an exit report, and it is basically green, yellow, and red. Green, of course, is good. Yellow is not as good. Red is not good. It is not done as something to point out, necessarily punitive problems, but it is to assist us in making sure that we have as safe a working environment as possible.
How does not having a safety coordinator in this process work?
It is a little challenging, but we have actually gone through one before where we didn't have a safety coordinator. We took the responsibilities of the safety coordinator and kind of split them up a little bit. The primary focus when they are here is with operations and within the building. So the operations manager is probably more involved with it than the safety coordinator. But if we have a safety coordinator, they will go along with them and be able to provide explanations because they have in the past come up with some things in their report that it was a misunderstanding. And so if you have somebody that can explain it, now they may still record it, but they sometimes just are looking at something and say, well, you don't have this. Well, we do. It's just here, not here.
Have you guys,
The other awesome thing, Carl, is there's been several of our employees, the superintendent, foreman, lineman, that have done receps at other facilities. And they take a lot of pride in that, you know, and so they walk around our facility and when they see something wrong, they fix it.
And our safety committee has been doing mock receps since the beginning of the year and actually a little bit last year. So that we are looking at the program and then going in and looking at, we went to the Kremlin, to Walden and around our facilities. And we look at the things that we know they're going to look at and say, okay, is it the way that it's supposed to be? If not, then we are giving feedback to the area to, you know, these are the things that you need to address. So that hopefully when the recap team comes in, there isn't something to address.
Since we're doing so well, is it really necessary to have a safety coordinator?
Yes.
Well, and that was my original question is what, if we don't have one, is that a
Well,
red flag or?
it is not, I mean, obviously, it's potentially something that they would address as a concern. We have split up the duties, but people are doing the things to cover for not having a safety coordinator, but they still have their other job to do. And so we are having to reassess priorities in order to be able to make sure that we have everything done before the RESAP folk gets here. And also just the ongoing safety program.
to me, I just want to say, I think safety is probably number one. It is number one, running this co-op and having a safety coordinator from my perspective is really important. And we need to have, you know, we need to do whatever we can to get, I know it's hard hiring folks, but it's money well spent. If it's, the money follows the priority, and that's a priority, is keeping everyone safe there.
Carla, it's a good question. I mean, we try to think about that every time we have turnover. With this position and the, you know, all of us doing these various duties ourselves, there's other stuff like Mark said, that's just not getting done. That's not as much of a priority. And for now, that's okay. But we do need someone to be able to head that for us. We're leaning pretty heavily on CREA for a lot of the training, which again is okay, but not ideal.
Not a long-term
Yeah,
solution.
not a long-term solution.
Mark?
We make staff available for this recap program in other areas in the state.
Yes, we do.
Who do we usually do and what kind of time commitment is that on our part to traveling around the state, being a team member, doing other
So like clubs. So
Don?
like my,
Okay.
we have a superintendent, we have 3 of our foremen, we have a couple linemen, myself, our previous safety coordinator, you know, so they would actually pick and choose, you know, on what dates they wanted to go, you know, because CREA would send out a list of dates saying, hey, I've got one in Mountain View or I've got one here, can you show up there? You know, and so like last year we did 4, you know, and we got really busy towards the end of the year when they wanted to do more, but we had to say no, but yeah.
Okay, that's how that works.
And typically it's like a 3-day commitment.
Yes. And they've actually decreased it down to a 2-day now, so they're really trying to be a little bit more efficient with it, but they do a really good job.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, I would ask
For a motion
acceptance.
to accept the safety report,
So moved.
second by Mark. All in favor?
Aye.
Let that be by?
Yep.
Okay.
So
Can we go-
now we are to the discussion items. So
Right.
we can either start the discussion items and,
Let's see if we can get through a couple discussion items,
okay,
if everyone's okay. with that. Okay, let's move on to the 401K statement board resolution.
so Jessica, do you want to take this?
Yes. So effective July 1st, 2022, the 401K pension plan will be restated according to an IRS-driven 5-year restatement schedule. So we need to review, approve, and readopt a reformatted version of the plan, which will not be ready until the July board meeting at the soonest. So this is basically giving Nreca the ability to do so. And then we'll look at the plan again and see what they change. I don't think it'll be anything significant, but hard to say.
Are there-
I'll make a motion to approve staff to entertain authorizing the 401K pension.
Okay, motion by Justin and second by Mark. All in favor?
All right,
Any opposed?
For the notes, can you restate how you phrased that? Moved
So
to-
I think what he was doing was just paraphrasing the resolution that you're passing.
Okay,
Because-
move to approve the resolution.
Yep.
Yep. And I guess July rule.
You have to pass it so that you can figure out what's in it. Yep.
Okay, on to,
B is, we had some discussions earlier in the year about discussing how districts are set. And we talked about scheduling a special meeting after the annual meeting. So the annual meeting is this month. So we are looking at possibly scheduling something in June or July and want to get the board's opinion as to, is June or July the right month, or I guess we could also do August if people have more availability, because this would be a separate meeting from the board meeting.
special meeting.
Yes.
Do people have a preference as to which months work better? And then we'll have to have some dates, and then we'll have to see if the facilitator's available on those dates. So if we could first try nail down a month,
July would work better for me.
okay?
Yeah, I'd rather push it as late as possible.
November. July, okay.
If we did July, early July, very late July work, in the middle, I have to be overseas for work.
Okay.
one question about July. Since we talked about setting something up. CoBank has a
Right. go
forum
through.
that overlaps our meeting. So if someone's gonna participate and we change our meeting, that may affect
okay.
a special meeting that we're gonna have that same month. So just to
So
keep that in
how
mind.
about, I know you don't necessarily like it, but how about if we send out some sort of, are you available these dates? And we get a feeling.
Well, I think you are correct, though. We should probably nail down a
Down the
month,
month.
and then we could
Well,
send out
maybe
a
we should,
poll
if we're
on
gonna
the
have
dates.
to move our meeting to CoBank, maybe we should go to August.
Yeah.
Is everybody okay with August?
August is tough for me.
Okay, back to
All
July,
month
we
or
go,
a portion of August.
because I think the 4th of July is like, if we have to move our meeting, probably not gonna move it back to the 4th of July week. We're gonna move it ahead, and then that's gonna stick another special meeting in there, like in the last week and a half of
Okay.
July.
This has to be
Or
accomplished.
whoever goes to
Yeah,
CoBank.
But this has to be accomplished before next year
Yes,
and has to be approved at next year's meeting,
Right.
annual meeting,
any change, yes.
any change. So you have basically September, October,
Now we have
you-
to notify it.
right,
Yeah,
but
but it's
you have a lot
We
of
still
Ten
have
time.
days,
some time,
so
yeah.
I think that the notification
No,
is.
not to the meeting. I mean, to do, if there are any changes in districts, that bylaw process.
Yes,
has
by
to
next
be
election.
By the
Right.
next election.
So
there are
I think
those.
you have to have this meeting and make a decision prior to the end of the year.
Right, okay.
We've got all the fall and first part of winter.
let's go, are you out all August?
First of August is okay.
Okay.
August, so.
Okay, let's shoot for the beginning of August and we'll send out some dates for the beginning of August for people. And you guys can,
Weren't we gonna have a NRECA come in or somebody else come in to
right, I reached out,
facilitate or
Yes.
provide
Yes.
some background?
Right.
Wouldn't it be wise to
well, they,
check with them to
Yeah,
see
well, they
what their
said-
availability is
Yes.
before we decide?
well, they are aware and they said, let us know some dates. And that they would like to attend virtually. They're planning on doing a virtual attendance to facilitate. Now, whether or not we decide we want to have someone actually in person, it's the, let's see.
Well, I think what we could do, if August is the month, then we can
Then
reach
we
out to
can work out.
NRECA to figure out what their dates are.
Right,
And then we would send those
Reach out.
dates out to the board and see if one of those dates worked.
right.
And if everything aligns, then we can select that date. If not, then we can look at possibly September.
Right.
So are we gonna decide whether it's in person or virtual?
Well, for us, it'll be in person, but they will probably be virtual. So they'll be facilitated.
That's why I'm saying that if we want to accept a virtual facilitator or not, that's
I think it's
something we
okay.
need to.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Well, we can, Carl, I tell you what, we could see if they want to come in person and then give us the budget detail for what that cost and or can decide. I don't know.
So what we can, I mean, since we know August, then we can reach out to them and ask them for virtual and in-person dates. And then send those to the board. The board can make a decision as to which of the two they'd like and what day might be
Right,
best,
and we could- Okay, perfect.
which takes us to C. CoBank is having a meeting in July and in Chicago. And they are looking at a bylaw, I think it's a bylaw change. I will scan that and send it to the board, but we need to, if the board so chooses, elect a representative to that meeting. We can also vote electronically. So if the board wants to elect a representative to that meeting, which is July 12th through the 14th in Chicago.
I was hoping to attend that meeting, but of course that depends on what happens Saturday also.
What meeting is it? What are they
It's
called?
the CoBank.
CoBank, they're
Annual meeting or whatever.
Go back to the old country.
No, we could
Well,
elect you
go back to
and
the
then
old
have an
country.
alternate.
And
Pardon?
alternate
Yeah,
could
let's-
vote.
We could have an
Elect
alternate.
Dick and then have and then,
an alternate.
Could Mark be our alternate then and vote electronically?
Yeah, you,
Yeah.
he said you can vote
so
electronically.
could I have a motion to that effect?
I move to nominate Dick as our CoBank representative with our CEO, Mark, as the alternate.
Second.
Okay, all in, motion by Kristen, second by Justin. All in favor? Okay,
So
In line with that, do you want to discuss either changing our meeting date or not, because there is a conflict? I didn't know whether it's necessary, but it's up to the board.
yeah. Well, should we all look at our calendars? And see,
well, I
because
guess,
I know that Carl's gonna the tri-state meeting will be probably moved a little bit for
So it's
July.
July
Do you
I
know?
would imagine, but
You don't know
I
yet?
don't have my
Okay.
iPad, so I can't tell you.
Okay. Because if we move our meeting, so our meeting is.
our meeting is
the-
currently on the
On the
14th.
14th. And that conference is the 12th through the 14th. I think.
12th, 13th, and 14th.
I'm sure Tri-State will be before that.
Yeah.
But
And
Tri-State will probably be the 11th and
12th.
12th.
I would,
Normally, it
maybe
would-
even the 5th, 6th. and I
you
don't
think
know.
they'll go right after 4th of July?
Sometimes I do.
What
I
about the
don't know
seventh?
what's, like I
Let's
said, I don't.
I wonder if Tri-State's meetings on there.
What day
Website.
is the 4th of July?
The
It's
fourth is
Monday.
Monday.
It's a Monday.
I'm guessing that they would probably have a Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday.
So
or
5th, 6th,
Wednesday,
7th.
Thursday and Friday. So
Okay, well,
What about the 11th, or no, the 12th, like earlier?
well, that'll
Oh, no,
be,
that's
Dick will be
also
flying on the 11th, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Or
I
the
think
12th.
22.
Depends on what
to
happens.
accommodate somebody going to the CoBank, I think we would need to move the meeting to the following week, which would be the week of the 18th.
And that's when you're gonna be gone, isn't it?
I'm gonna be gone from the 9th through the 24th in all likelihood, so I may be missing.
You're gonna be
some
missing
of
no
those.
matter what.
You
You're
might,
gonna
you
miss
can
no matter
zoom
what.
in.
I could probably do it if it was like the 7th or the 8th, but yeah, if it's later.
Carl, the last day of Tri-State, are you there on the 3rd day, do you think? Is
say
it-
again,
If the Tri-State meeting is the 5th, 6th, 7th, is the 7th the morning of the board meeting? Okay, so you can't
the
do the
last day.
7th. Okay, do I hear anybody interested in the 8th? Or should we just stick with our regular date?
I say stick with a regular date.
On the regular date, Kristen won't be here and potentially Dick. So
right.
you would have 5 of the 7. Which, assuming all 5 are here, that's a quorum.
What do we need for quorum?
4. 4. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you, or you don't know if you can attend virtually yet?
I'll be in Bangkok, so time zones make that a little difficult.
You don't
To
need
get up in the
sleep.
middle of the night.
Yeah,
Go
You
get
can
some
just-
sleep.
but possibly.
Turn on to make the quorum.
possibly. If I could just join for part of the meeting, and not miss a whole night's sleep, that would be good.
So
I
the,
could do the 8th.
Do other people want to try for the 8th? Friday, that's a Friday, Justin,
Yes.
that's not
Fridays,
bad for you. That's-
Tuesdays and Thursdays.
the
Are
oth-
better.
the other option would be to move it to the week of the 18th, and the 19th and the 21st would be the Tuesday and Thursday.
The board reports that would be better if I could interject at all. just
Yeah, to
be
move it
earlier,
later.
sometimes with financial closing.
Right.
A little tighter, but
Okay, so Kristen's out the 14th and the 21st regardless. Dick would be back.
Mhm.
19th.
19th or 21st are fine.
So you move it to the 21st. Who's in for the
21st will
21st?
be hard for
Oh,
pricing or
okay.
19th.
19th.
19th?
also a problem.
Also a
That's
problem?
YW and Highline meetings, so, and Bryson is at those, and I've got.
Could you do both at the same time?
What about Thursday afternoon? What if we try and be really efficient with our time? and Just have an afternoon meeting.
That'd work.
Which Thursday afternoon?
The week before the 7th. I know that's a little tight on the financial reports, but then if Tri-State has their meeting in the morning, would they finish up by lunchtime or? do they sometimes-
Yeah, but I doubt that I could get here that quick.
You'd have to
Maybe
be
I
up
don't
here.
know.
You'd have to
It'd be up
call
here
in.
at 2,
Yeah.
you know, really.
Sometimes the meetings
2:30.
go into, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, depends on the issues. And
Yeah,
probably by July, a lot of this FERC thing will be
yeah.
up in the
Yeah.
air.
They'll be talking about the
or
appeal by then.
Settled, so
Yeah,
I'm
no, it'll just keep. it's gonna keep
anticipating
going
that
on.
there'll be more issues.
All right. How about, what was the problem with the 19th?
19th and 21st were
Oh,
Highline
that's,
and
it's a
and-
legal, can we do one meeting without Levi and Bryson?
Mhm.
You're just gonna have to
I
have,
wouldn't advise it.
We can get in all kinds of trouble by then.
Possibly.
well,
Again, I mean, it sounds like you should have a quorum on the 14th.
yeah, let's just stick with the 14th.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Okay,
No problem.
Okay. So that takes care of that. D, policy B6, local vendor preference. It is in your packet and it is 1 page and does not appear that Levi had any changes to policy B6
I'll make a motion to approve.
and to make it public.
thank you,
And make
Justin.
public.
Mark Folt, Justin, motion by Justin, second by Mark Folt. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to B8, release of corporate information.
You have the policy in the packet. It is 4 pages. And there is a change on page 1 of the policy in 2A.
Okay, do people get a chance to
Yeah.
review this?
We provide that information anyway, to contractors that we employ to work for us.
Right.
So it doesn't need to be protected.
Right, right.
I would suggest modification to A to include public board policies, or board policies made public.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you want to make an amendment or move to
Yeah.
approve this and with that amendment?
The other thing I wanted to bring to people's attention is I think there's some language.
On the first one,
Oh, yeah.
do you want to make all board policies public unless the board determines that they should be held confidential? I don't think that we have any, but I mean, the board may end up with a policy that they want to be confidential.
Yeah, well, one question is, we already have some language in there that says the website's public, which obviously, and if we're posting them on the website, then that's technically included within that. So you could argue that that's already covered. May,
But so are the
Useful
construction
process, right?
loans
Yeah,
in some ways, so.
Right,
It's
this
like
list is a includes list, right? So
Okay.
in
Yeah.
practice, and my interpretation would be that just because it's not listed there, doesn't mean you can't, the board motions to make the policies public, to me, is sufficient. It doesn't, it's also fine to put it in here, but just because it's not in the general information section, doesn't mean you can't disclose it.
does it say includes, general information includes?
Yeah, it says general information made available to members, non-members, and the general public
Okay, yeah.
includes.
But then, but below under confidential, it says other than general information identified above.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
other than is a board policy other than, because it's not identified in A.
Make a motion to approve policy B8 with an amendment to add the words after general publications, public board policies. So it would read consumer newsletters, general publications, public board policies, comma, construction drawings, overhead underground lines, etc.
Can you give me an example of a policy that the board would hold confidential?
Well, I don't believe that we have had any that have come up
I
at
know,
this
but can
point.
you give me a circumstance where that would occur? I
I
can't
don't-
envision myself that
I-
we would want to hide something from the
Yeah.
membership, but I don't know that.
I can't, I don't have an example, but if there was something that the board wanted to, and in this policy, you say that they are public, then you would not be able to.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
I mean, I can't think of anything that we have in any of our policies that we would not make public.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that you won't in the future come up with a policy that you do not want to be.
And so this, Kristen's amendment defines it as public policy. So we're covered if some board in the future decides they want a confidential policy.
Or you could just amend this policy again.
Yeah, they could
Take
just-
policy
right.
out if you wanted to change it.
Are there,
Also, I didn't catch this before. Our electric service construction standards aren't part 1 and 2.
do we need to go back and,
I would just say electric service construction standards and take part 1 and 2 out.
all right,
My mistake.
what do I do, go back? We don't have a second on the motion. Okay.
With
Yeah,
this many
let's,
revisions, why
okay,
don't we just bring it back next
we've
month?
got
Yeah.
2 revisions that hopefully Levi will wordsmith, and we will table this. and-
So just delete parts 1 and 2, is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
delete
Yes.
parts 1 and 2, add public policies.
So is the
So let's. table
feeling of the
this.
board to table this until next meeting and then come back with that edited?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that would be.
that's more
Yes.
prudent.
Do I need to withdraw my motion or do we need to vote it down or?
Well, no, there wasn't a
Does-
second.
okay.
so
There wasn't a
it dies for
second,
lack of a
perfect.
second.
Yep.
Okay, on the financial management, B3, I would recommend we table this because there's certain references to RUS in it that I think we need to go back and examine with the new lender whether or not those make sense to have in here, or if they're accomplishing certain things, how to wordsmith it.
Under I, that one.
Yeah,
Form 555,
right,
all
yeah,
those.
yeah, exactly.
Someone at Levi to look at E1, so we talked about the last meeting.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
and yeah, so I have
And
some
so,
advice for executive session on that.
yeah, so let's,
So we
let's,
table.
yeah, let's table that and we can discuss it further in executive session.
Which brings us to partial requirements contract.
Okay,
So we had the discussion at the last board meeting and walked through the various components of the partial requirements. And if we were to exercise, we selected the 20 megawatts based on analysis that Scott did on trying to identify a number, and it's actually 19.79 or something like that. But what we would have at any time as load on our system. So it would be pretty much a 724, 365. That's why we selected 20 megawatts. As I mentioned earlier, the form does allow us to suggest or to select something below that as a minimum that we would accept. And we discussed last month as well the financial aspects of it and did the comparison between the costs of an alternative power supplier for that 20 megawatts and the cost of purchasing the power from Tri-State. And if you recall, we had 3 scenarios or 4 scenarios at assuming that Tri-State's power never went up in cost over 20 years, assuming that there was a 1% escalation, a 1.5% escalation, and a 2% escalation. Of all of those scenarios that we did, and we also looked at it as a 20 or a 25-year contract for the supplier. There was only the one for the 20 years at Tri-State's power never increasing, that it was basically a break even. So with that, I will open it up to discussion, and if there are specific things related to it, financial or otherwise, that the board would like to discuss, then I would suggest that we do that in executive session. But
Question. At various points throughout the past several years, we've had members, Winter Park Resort, Town of Fraser, Summit County, that have expressed a desire to supply their citizens or their business with a higher percentage of renewable power. So if we were to execute this contract, could we be in a position to say, all right, Mountain Parks retains all of the savings financially, but then we can allocate a portion of the renewable energy credits associated with this power to help those members meet their goal? In other words, can we tell Fraser, look, we've been publicizing that we're going to be supplying 50% renewable by 2025. We're actually going to get you 70% by 2025. And or say the same to Winter Park Resort and or the Summit County folks. I ask because I think there's a potential member benefit from doing so, a potential to really show our members that we're trying to meet their needs. Obviously, there's a potential financial benefit, but then moreover, there could be a financial implication for Mountain Parks if in so doing, that reduces pressure from those large members to want to go out and do passionate leader project, for example. So I wanted to ask, is that something that is possible and that the board would be open to, kind of like allocating the renewable energy credits amongst members that way instead of just spreading it out to everyone?
Well, I will give a quick answer and say anything is possible. However, with the alternative power supplier, the power that they will supply us is 80% renewable, and we would have the RECs associated with that. Discussions that have been had at the tri-state managers meetings are that we can buy some of the RECs that tri-state has if we wanted, if one of the, let's say Winter Park wanted their power to be green and they wanted the RECs associated with that, we have the ability to buy those RECs from tri-state because they have significantly more RECs than they need. So I think that with or without this, there is the ability for us to acquire the RECs to provide to Winter Park or Fraser or Summit County to do that. There is a cost, but the RECs are relatively inexpensive. And currently, currently they're relatively
But they
inexpensive.
expire. at
Yes.
some point.
Well, but what you would do is on an annual basis, you'd have to buy the RECs and provide.
But that's
So-
if we did the tri-state, if we went out and buy the RECs, if we executed partial requirements, we had those RECs, that
We
gives
will
you
have
leverage.
RECs for 16 megawatts of the power
And
because it would be 80%.
are those to
Which
be
is keeping
given,
us
since
above
we
50
really
kind of
can't
hold
use
up
them?
anyways.
Are those to be given or
Yeah.
sold?
That would be a discussion for the board to decide whether you wanted to give those RECs to the entities or to sell them. But currently the market for selling them, as Carl mentioned, like Tri-State, it's $1. So it's not something that has a tremendous value and it doesn't have much of a value to us. But as Kristen points out, if there is a public entity or a large private entity that was looking to say, we have green power and here's the RECs to prove it, it would have a greater value to them.
Or if, for example, you wanted to try and nudge the town of Winter Park to sign a franchise agreement, that gives you a card in your deck.
But wouldn't they need them ongoing? And we don't get new RECs every year, do we?
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Okay, so from the project or from the
Yes,
renewable, we
from
would
the
get new-
renewable power. So for instance, actually it's on my list to do, but we have to sign a compliance letter with state of Colorado. And Tri-State actually prepares the letter, sends it to us, and we just tweak the thing, put my name in, Mountain Parks, and I sign the letter. And it says that we meet their standards and we meet it by Tri-State's RECs. And so Tri-State sends this out to every one of the co-ops and provides that information. So, but yes, it is on a recurring basis. Every year you have to do it, but every year that you produce renewable energy, you get those green credits. Well, RECs, but
With respect to the partial requirements, where we're gonna get the replacement power, has there been any discussion with the change in the scenario on renewable as far as the costs? We talked to people a month or two ago, and in the last month or two with everything going on, the world has changed. Things are much more expensive. And my question is that going to affect where we think we are and what our power will cost us?
that's a multi-layered question. So I'm going to take the first layer.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier in my report, the term sheet that they provided, the pricing is the same that we discussed last month. And so when we worked out the PPA and signed that, it will be at that price. As things change, will power supply in general be more expensive? I would say that is likely. Tri-State is working to put together with the rate committee a recommendation that then they will file with FERC in September of 2023 or earlier. And we don't know at this point what that will be, but I think that whether you are talking about in the next year, in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, I think power, most everybody believes power will get more expensive. Now, with the alternate power supplier that we have talked to, whether it's the 20 or the 25 year, that is a fixed price contract. So once we sign it, then for that 20 or 25 years, it does not go up in cost.
With the term sheet, they will hold that price till what time?
Well, with the term sheet, if the board approves, then we will move forward to negotiating the PPA with them and getting the language. We already have the PPA because they provided it in the past. And then that price is there. There is an exclusivity agreement that we have signed with them, so that price would last. Now, if it takes us 2 years to negotiate this agreement, then probably not. But the problem that we would have is that we, in the application to Tri-State, are going to say that we want to start doing this January 1 of 2025. So I anticipate that this will take us probably 60 to 90 days to work out. Now, obviously, Tri-State is part of that process. And so based on their availability, it may take a little bit longer. But in the application, we are going to say that we want this to start January 1 of 2025. And I don't anticipate that we would have any issues with the price changing between now, when it is approved, if it's approved, and when we get the agreement done.
We'll have to sign something with crossover before we get conclusion from Tri-State or know the amount that we are going to be allocated.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay, that's
My understanding of the Tri-State process is that they know that they have 97 megawatts. By tomorrow at 5 PM, they're going to know what people want of that 97 megawatts. And it is a relatively simple process for them to say, okay, if the number is less than 97, everybody gets what they want. If the number is greater than 97, then everybody gets a percentage of what they want. And based on whether they put in what they put in the max and the min, then, you know, if somebody says, max, we want 20 and we only want 20, then that probably moves you down under 97. And so that process for them to tell us whether or not they can give us what we are asking for, I would say probably is a 2 to 4 week process. And frankly, 2 weeks is probably longer than it needs to take. So we will know before we finalize the agreement with Crossover how much we get, because obviously if they came back and this is not a possibility that I see, but if they came back and said, you know, sorry, but we're not going to give you anything, then obviously we wouldn't negotiate.
point of delivery.
Hey, Carl, I was just gonna, so I agree with everything Mark said. It's just like we're not obligated to do anything until we sign the final PPA. There is still the possibility that they, just like we had with the prior solar project, where something happens and they say, hey, we can't do it for that price. Now this is the price. And then we obviously, but we have the opportunity to not go, not sign the contract.
But will be.
We're not anticipating that. and
But in
that's why I
that
agree with
same
Mark.
process, we'll be locked into a partial requirement contract with Tri-State.
No,
Well,
Again, not until
No.
we sign the actual contract, we might lose a application fee.
yeah,
yeah, we would most likely lose the $25,000 application fee, but until we sign the agreement and that,
Which would be January 1,
No.
2020.
no, we would sign the agreement and the anything with Tri-State, we would sign that as soon as we can get all the documents in order. The January 1 of 2025 is just the date at which we would like to start.
Start the
Because-
power, actually taking
Yeah.
power.
In the settlement agreement, which I believe I sent to the board.
And is that official final
no,
Yeah, that's another variable,
Well,
right?
wait,
Yeah.
wait.
Well, in the settlement agreement, there is, towards the end of the agreement, a schedule for the buyout payments per megawatt. And what you see is that depending on when you say you want to start, that determines how much it's going to cost you per megawatt. I believe the last section is as of December 2023. So anything after that is at the lowest price.
Right.
And that is the price at which we did the calculation of what the projected buyout would be, which was the $19.7 million.
But has the settlement agreement been
The
approved by
settlement,
FERC and is
the
final?
settlement agreement has not been approved. It has been filed. To my knowledge, there has not been anybody that has opposed it. There are some that have not signed on to support it, but there has not been any opposition.
And it's only a few more days of
Yeah.
that window's only, I can't remember. It's only a few more days. There's
Right.
an opportunity.
Typically, it's like 30 to 45 days. So,
Can you remind
and
us of what the savings potential was?
Yeah, what is the, and maybe we need to go in an executive session and look at the term sheet. But
yeah.
if you want a gross number that's somewhat gives people an indication of
well,
over the
the savings were dependent upon which
This
we
scenario.
did. And so I think that's probably a better topic for executive session because we can go back over all of those numbers in the 8 different scenarios that we looked at.
would people feel more comfortable doing that before taking action or not action or not enacting on this?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Okay, so we'll save that for executive session.
Okay, so then we will move partial requirements to executive session. Which brings us to the CFC loan resolution. Levi, did we get anything back from them?
Maybe yesterday afternoon, I
Okay,
didn't see anything, but we're not ready. Yeah, so CFC and CoBank are still, so, why do I keep getting, we did our buyout with CoBank, right?
CoBank,
right,
yes.
I get it.
CoBank is, it still has not presented the mortgage that is going to be used between CoBank and CFC. So we're waiting on that to be able to move forward with that.
And for clarification for the board's purposes, the CFC loan resolution would be for our ongoing work plan loan.
Right. That's the, yeah, CFC is the new loan that the documentation is going to change once CoBank gets the mortgage ready. Everything's going to be based on that new mortgage. And we're going to remove all of the past mortgage or
And-
USF.
And these don't affect
What's,
us.
what's the timetable for this needing to be done? Or when do we expect it to be
Well,
done?
we
Is
wanted
there a
it done
firm
at
date?
this board meeting, but because they wanted us to basically be able to sign the agreement. Until they give us they get their part of it done, we can't get the resolution and the board can't approve it. So
Right.
we will move this to the June board meeting. There,
And we're not planning on drawing down
We
anytime
are-
soon.
Right.
so
we are not
it's
planning
not
on
gonna-
drawing
on our side, it's
the
not
money.
that.
It's not going to
urgent.
affect the work.
Right.
No.
The work plan implementation right now.
Right.
Okay, so let's table this and then let's take a break. How about a 15-minute break?
So come back at 9:50.
9:50. Okay, are we ready to get going?
Yeah.
Okay. On to the reports. Engineering.
Okay, you have my report. As I noted in the report, new service applications have really picked up. And we're doing all right dealing with it. In engineering, I think supply chain, Stacy's group with the warehouse is doing an admirable job trying to keep up. Definitely keeping a lot of that in mind, especially dealing with customers. Cost of materials being what they are. In this case, a lot of the times we don't know what the price of it is going to be until we actually receive it. But that's more of what the warehouse is doing, managing that. We'll work together trying to do that. We have the Highway 125 project out to bid. Contract. Project because we have currently underground cable and conduit laid over across the top of the ground. Have since the fire, so really looking forward to getting that project done. We have the Buffalo Creek, which is the spur going off the King Ranch. It just went out to bid. And I anticipate we will not be prepared to award that at the June board meeting. And we will have to have discussions with the owner at the end of King Mountain Ranch before we are able to come to the board and ask for award of that contract. So hopefully we'll have a lot of that worked out by July. There's a third project up in Trail Creek, also a FEMA project that we may go out to bid on, but the lead time on transformers may delay that project. So I'm not quite sure. I haven't had final discussions with Don's group on how we want to do that, but that project will be affected by the supply chain concerns. And I think that's the fiber project Mark has already covered. Contractor for phase 1 back this week, and the phase 2 contractor, assuming we award the contract at this meeting, is gearing up to be on site.
And to Scott's point on the 125, we got an email yesterday, response from Western United. The transformers that we need, they're looking at a June 2023 delivery date.
That's the Trail Creek.
Oh, I thought it was the 125. Okay.
We don't really need very many transformers for 125, but Trail Creek is a subdivision.
Okay.
And so as such, to convert the entire subdivision from overhead to underground.
Yeah.
So that is the supply chain issue that we're going to have with that project.
You said
That's the one that-
2025?
No, 2023,
Oh.
which, yeah, it sounds like a long time, but it's actually better than it has been. Because it's only at this point about a year, and it was as long as 18 months.
When we change out transformers,
Mhm.
did they go and get rebuilt and come back to us, or do we?
So the past practice has been if a transformer is old, it would get scrapped. Good usable transformer would go in stock. If it had some kind of problem, like a leak or something like that, it would, the transformer would get scrapped. Now, yesterday, after our work plan meeting, and Don, I don't know if you were there when we discussed this part of it, but I did ask Brian from the warehouse to investigate some of those leaking 167 transformers that were out of service, having them repaired.
Yep.
So we're going to be looking at those kinds of things just to try to deal with the supply chain. But unfortunately, if I thought of it, someone else has probably thought of it too. And so sooner or later, the rebuild shops are gonna start getting busy with that kind of business that they didn't used to get. And so, you're kind of just chasing it. But hopefully we'll be able to do that. We needed a 167 kVA transformer. Lead time on it was well beyond when the customer wanted the job service. This is the Byers Peak Ranch project. And so we identified numerous 167 kVA transformers that were significantly underloaded. We wrote up jobs to replace them. And of the 5 that we replaced, 4 of them were leaked. So that's when I said, well, we can find more of them. That's not an issue. However, we also ought to look at repairing some of these instead of just scrapping.
Can you refresh my memory on King Mountain? Is there, where are we at that? What resolution?
So
Running
the
3-phase?
The decision that we made is.
Yeah,
that we
hold
would
on.
Should
get-
we,
Hold on.
Scott, hold on. I'm not sure how far we should go into that in open session.
But we
I can
can,
speak in general terms if you would like, or we can do it in executive.
It doesn't matter to me, but
Let's move
I
on
just,
to executive session.
Okay,
I have a,
I
Question.
apologize. Thanks for stopping me.
last meeting in open session, we discussed that a year or so ago, there was a telecommunications number that we wanted to make sure they were properly maintaining the line that they're responsible for. Did you manage to follow up on that? So we're good?
Okay, please refresh my memory.
that's one that goes up the hill. WAPA owns the line, and it goes up to a,
That's the one that goes up the
communication site.
water.
and
Did
they,
you guys look into that?
yeah, they have made repairs to address the safety issues. And they contacted us to see if they rebuilt the line, if they could transfer it to us, and we said no. Because the maintenance on the line, because of the way that it goes up the side of the mountain, is challenging.
That's a different
That's
one.
a different.
That is the one going up to Blue Ridge. She's referring to the one on Wolford.
Oh, okay.
No, not Rabbit Ears Village, it's Wolford Mountain. And there's one of the comm companies has a site up there, and you and I needed to talk about that. And I did not get with you on that. Did we have, I know that we had looked at it in the past, but
Seems like a good drone thing. Anyway, let's make sure that that gets done.
yeah,
And get a
Yes.
follow-up.
I had that on
June.
my to-do list many times and I never.
Yeah.
I will take that.
I've got a to-do list off that.
Okay,
Don, we need to get with me.
I know.
So,
Much more
I
important.
noticed coming down 125, where the cable is supposedly laying on the ground. I didn't see the cable, but there was a bulb down there. It's all underwater. Is that an issue? Is that an issue? I mean,
Electrically,
Willow
that's,
Creek is running,
electrically, it's not.
yeah, well, I would assume so, but it's all underwater.
All of that equipment is capable of operating submerged.
Okay.
However, if we end up having to work on it, that would be.
I saw that same thing, Carl. I was up there the other day. I go, that's not right.
Get your wetsuit out, or actually a dry suit.
Yeah.
I didn't even like driving by it. Shock.
any
Okay.
more questions for Scott? Okay, Don, you're up.
So you've seen my report. I'll jump to the last page to start with. I did render my resignation and I'm very grateful for my tenure here at Mountain Parks and great group of employees and great group of management team to work with. I'm actually going to finish my career teaching, so I don't know how long that'll last, but I'm actually going to a college in Iowa, get back closer to the grandkids and some teaching and maybe some utility stuff too. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, thank you.
Happy for you, but sorry to see you go.
I As part of my report, I just wanted to pass that around a little bit. So you're gonna start seeing the crews putting some of that pole wrap on, and it's been engineered to actually withstand some significant fire. And FEMA's paying for some of this on the actual work that we did. I think Stacy, I actually agreed with when I said FEMA's paying for it, because we haven't seen money yet. But this will wrap up on the pole and go up a lot of poles. So,
On new, are FEMA paying for it on any areas that we've identified as potential risks for fire?
Stacy's working on that too in regards to the mitigation plans that we're doing. And we're continuing to put more out there. It's just, there was a little bit of work that they got distracted by. in the
I don't know if you should be
Yeah,
handling
no,
it,
so,
Carl.
yeah.
Don, do you, is there a MSDS for this? Should we be handling it?
Oh, you're good. You can handle it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
Just a little asbestos. It
Yeah, I
don't
was
bother
like, I
anything.
don't know. It's code.
We got a good deal on them.
There's two different systems.
The animals nibble at it and they just fall over, so don't worry about it.
Side, outside.
This is one that.
What's the cost per pole?
Oh, it's actually, so we were down to $600 per pole with labor.
To put this on?
How tall do you go up? Oh,
12 feet.
12 feet.
And then
How many poles do you envision doing?
So we're gonna do like, on Highway 34, Bunty and Willow Creek, where those poles were replaced after the fire. So it's paying up to 90%, and then the state would pay 5%. We're up just 5%.
So what was the number of poles?
So yeah, I think it's around 50.
50?
Yeah.
So our share of it is $30 per pole.
This is produced by that actually.
More poles.
We'll have to see.
That'd be nice.
Okay, any more questions for Don?
Type of spray or something that you could spray on your weapon?
There is, I talked to some other co-ops and they've used some of that spray and some of the signage really deteriorated that. So they were starting to go with this, Justin.
Okay.
You know, yeah. That spray, I'm just kind of worried about some environmental stuff too, because it really, they were showing me some pictures where it, you know, how you can see where a pole line where the creosote goes down and just kind of kills the grass. This really good too.
Question, a lot of authorities are predicting another dry summer with elevated fire risk. Do we anticipate going back to one shot? And if so, when?
Yeah, so we'll follow the Green County website. I saw Jessica had that a little bit ago when that fire truck went by. So Scott, and I was working together on that even last summer. It was just, as soon as we did that, the switching goes into place. The nice thing is it exists from last summer, you know, and we do have some extra precautions out there with the strip savers that we installed. In some of those high fire potential areas. That will be nice too. That'll be a nice thing that is not as labor intensive as far as going out. Putting things on one shot. We already put the troublesome circuit on one shot, and that was mostly due to the osprey migration and their nesting. And we've got people patrolling that on a daily basis.
Do we anticipate doing a little communications around that? I know we've explained this before, but.
Yes, I mean, before we turn it on, yes, we will send out notices and we will do a press release to the papers so that members know that they may see a little bit more outages as a result of it, but it is to prevent against the fire danger.
I think everyone respects that.
Oh, that'd be great.
What's the difference in cost for a metal pole versus a white line?
So I had a vendor hit me up at that, in our ECA, and just wanted to get that to you.
I mean, just out,
Yeah.
in general.
And that was very-
5 times or
Well, $600 to have a full wrap.
Metal parts, concrete
Yeah.
poles,
It's kind of amazed that the lifespan was as short as it was. It was like 30 years.
on a
On
metal.
a metal pole.
Yeah, those wood ones last a long time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that with the East Troublesome fire, the heat was such that I don't think it would have mattered the type of pole you had, it still would have been damaged.
Enough to replace, yeah.
You know, is it the mine or the mill? Where they had some damage to the transmission line, and those were, I believe, metal poles.
Those are wood structures.
So those are wood structures.
Yeah.
We're tri-states that they're rebuilding down in New Mexico. I saw they lost 6 structures. Are those metal or wood?
Is the goal of that wrap to, so that you won't have, it won't do any damage, you won't have to replace them all, or just to keep the poles up?
Yeah,
You want,
that guy, he actually did a demonstration for everybody here out in our yard. And he had this huge torch out there torching that. And then, yeah, you know, we peeled the wrap off. There wasn't any scar.
It kind of expands
It does.
when the heat hits it.
Oh.
And
that's what's, what the mesh is like.
Yeah, it expands. It actually, kind of like those, I compared it with when I was a little kid and we had those little snakes that we would light on fire in the driveway. And they, you know, and they would expand.
Any other questions for Don? Stacy?
All right, you saw my report and you saw some of my pictures. We had some fun this last month when I went bowling. We had administrative professionals say, and we just changed it to office, leave the office and do some outside work. And we all got dressed up, and that's what those pictures are. Went bowling. But that was a lot of fun, just to get away, team building. Financials this last month, we're still seeing some growth in the residential sector, but we did have quite a few small commercial, large power decreases. Essentially, some of the oil wells and oil fields, pumping was down, electricity usage was down, which we have been made aware of, just hadn't seen it yet. So March was the first month that I saw significant, not significant, I saw significant from those fields impact their contributions, about 4% of our sales. 4% that's down 60%. So somewhat significant to me, but not as large of an impact on financials because we're still looking good. You'll continue to see if you're looking at the budget versus the year to date. We did take all the fees from the RUS buyout payoff as an expense. So that was a $550,000 difference. So that's why they're down quite a bit. Also, March was a little bit of it was a colder month than usual. So again, that mismatch, the power bill was high. Bills continue to be good, right on track.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Had you heard of, I hadn't until just recently, that Colorado passed legislation that will allow us to charge for credit cards?
Just to the credit card users, we're charging now for credit cards.
But
No, we're not.
Yes, we
We're
are.
charging for
Oh,
the
everything.
method
We
that
we have an
they're using.
electronic
One-time.
transaction
One-time.
fee.
Oh, so they allowed for. credit
There's some-
card usage, yes.
There, so now we won't have to
Let's,
go through all
Really?
that.
That's great.
well, you guys get together
Yeah.
and figure
It-
out.
No. and
Starting
what
July
option?
1st,
When?
July 1st. And there's some,
Okay.
it's not just Wild West, you can do whatever you want, but
Okay.
so we'll
No, I
get
did
together
not
on
know
that.
Thank you
Yeah.
for the update on that. Yeah, so we do charge for our online payment fee. Yep.
We could
Which is
change
primarily
that.
credit card users, but also some people pay by check. But the fees for credit cards are a lot more than the banks charge for. Yeah. That's good. Thanks.
So I think, to make it simplified, the easy way to do it is going to be that we can charge 2% per credit card.
But we have to think about, I'll let you
Yeah, right
guys
now we
come
do a
up with
flat
some
Yeah,
options.
right now we charge $2.
$2, yeah.
Yeah,
And-
so that's so like I said, so there's limitations on how you do it. You can either charge 2% or the actual cost.
the way I understand it, that would be next to impossible to do because the actual cost changes depending on
know
the.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Let's have you guys do that. Okay. Come up with, that would help things. On the online.
Continue to work with FEMA, taking over some of just Dawn's administrative duties with that and then get up to speed. We haven't seen any money yet, like Dawn talked about, but we were waiting on a couple projects to get those pole wraps on. So we had some current mitigation, some current projects that we submitted to FEMA. And then we also have future mitigation work that we're submitting for as well, so.
And any
Yeah.
updates on the FEMA reimbursements requests? Any good news on
Yeah,
that?
still in
regard?
process.
Okay.
Yeah, we have what they call a process assessment next Wednesday. They're coming to our office all day
Mhm.
and making sure that we are in compliance with their processes before they start giving us money, I guess. And like we absolutely give them every single invoice, every single check, every single bank statement to show that checks were paid, every single timesheet, but they want to look at just internal processes as well. So
And this isn't FEMA, this is actually the state, because the money has been obligated to the state.
Mhm.
And so this is the state that's actually doing a audit before they enforce it.
well, after the process inspection, that some of those jobs that have been obligated and the state has reviewed those. Any other questions?
Stacy, on Mountain Park Services, can you refresh what the accounts payable figure is on that? It's about $73,000.
Normally, those are PPA, well, those are. So we have the PPA agreement, so that would be accounts receivable from Mount Parks. And then we turn around and pay CoBank for the 2 solar facilities, Walden. So it's probably just timing. We got those invoices, we had received payment from, because we bill Mount Parks pays Mount Parks Services, Mount Parks Electric pays Mount Parks Services. Mount Park Services turns around and pays.
Okay.
And that's almost exactly the amount.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Joe, you're up.
Okay, so you have my report. If there's questions on that, I'll answer those. I just have a few extra remarks regarding the CREA IT conference. Well, yeah, they call it CREA IT conference. It's turned into the CREA Cyber Conference. So CREA is developing what they call the RECAP program, which is take off from reset with, instead of safety, it's cyber achievement program. I volunteered to be one of their facilitators for that, as well as help develop the program. The first rendition is going to be just like 25 questions approximately. We don't even have it developed yet. One of the people from PVREA is developing those questions for this first round. The second piece of that recap will be a facilitated tabletop event that your co-op has to participate in. You have to have representation from all of the areas, departments of your co-op that play a role in it, how you would handle the event that takes place. They have a few folks that have already gone through the tabletop. They're hoping to get 6 or 7 more by year end, but scheduling is proving to be a little challenging for various facilitators to attend those. Other than that, there were some interesting points that DMEA mentioned about when they presented on the cyber event that took place at DMEA. Some of it they don't really want publicized. But one of the things I found interesting about it that was public was in a ransomware event, which is what took place at DMEA. It was discovered, and it was kind of known by all of us, but it was kind of kept in the back. Even if you were to pay the ransom and get the decryption key, you have to have enough storage on your system to decrypt. Ratios are about 2.5, in some cases more. So if you have a storage array that's capable of 1 terabyte of data and you have 0.5 terabyte of data, you'd say that's fine. But the decryption process can take 2.5 times your data size to decrypt it. So there have been a few companies, not DMEA per se, but a few companies have reported that their storage array was not large enough to handle the decryption process. And so they were stuck.
So did they end up getting more storage?
Well,
Or
yeah.
temporary storage?
You can't.
You can't.
You can't, at least the way their array was set up,
You
they
couldn't
could
do
not. Now, they also aren't confirming or denying that they paid a ransom, which.
So do you
Yeah.
think that people doing a ransom are investing in storage?
Yeah, I think so.
Hey, it's the storage here, Dick.
I think so.
Get you coming and
New
going.
enterprise. There you go.
For
Just don't
our
move it.
purposes, what would your recommendation be, that we invest in more storage?
Well,
capacity?
we're okay right now. We did an upgrade to our system last year, and currently we're running a little under 30%. So by all accounts and by our vendors' best estimate, there are some variables as to exactly how they can encrypt it and what it would take to decrypt it. But using the facilities that are natively available to them through the storage itself or through Microsoft Windows Server encryption mechanisms, we are safe in that regard. But it's certainly something to keep in mind, where you think you're operating at 50%, that should be plenty. You know, you've got plenty of room to grow. You've built in these growth, a percentage of growth every year of how much data you keep on your system. Accounting for a decryption process is not something that always factors into that. So right now we're safe. We will recalculate and see where we are in 2 or 3 years. But we're at the rate we're growing, we're safe for at least the next 2 to 3 years. The other thing that was interesting was Federated gave a kind of what they see. They don't try to predict, but they say what happens from actual claims that they've seen. They, despite many predictions of a spike in cyber events and attacks due to COVID, they did not see that, which I thought was interesting. And the other thing that they also said was they are seeing an increase in the number of people paying ransoms.
And are they actually, I mean, it seems like you pay the ransom, but you have no guarantee that you're gonna get a key.
Well, that was the interesting part of it too, was
People
that
getting
they
your
said
keys?
that these guys don't want a bad name.
So they're giving them the keys.
They don't want to bet in their crooks.
They want
They don't
people to
want to
pay,
bet.
so.
Yeah, because if they
People
go
stop
down,
paying.
if we pay and you don't give us the
Well, we're
key,
buying the storage.
no one's ever
anyway.
gonna pay you again. So, I thought that was interesting because
They're reliable.
Right, well, the recommendation has always been to don't pay. Don't
Right.
give them the incentive to make this a real business.
Sure.
So we'll see where that trend, if that trend continues or not, but they saw a lot of them pay. No, I think it became a cost benefit, right? Even if we became the victim of an attack, you know, there's a significant amount of work restoring systems, bringing things back. And if you could shell out, I mean, in some cases, it's as low as $25,000. $25,000 would save weeks of agony really.
Well, can't it take weeks to decrypt it?
Well, it shouldn't take weeks,
Okay.
but just to bring the system, decrypting, you should almost be able to do, well, as fast as it was encrypted, which usually happens. Yeah, not like that, but hours for a system our size anyway. But the pieces that you, the $25,000 versus a team of people here for weeks on.
That's an easy calculation.
But
That's
yeah,
25 grand.
well, and that was the low end, but
Yeah.
there was a scenario that they went through, and supposedly it was based on real world numbers where they said this ransom was $50,000. We did a tabletop that was facilitated by this group Skyhelm,
It still
and
seems
the
cheap.
ransom was 50 grand. And I was sitting next to two guys from PVREA, and they said, I guarantee
No, let's
you.
not,
we
let's
would
not
say-"
advertise that the
Yeah, so-
ransoms are too low.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We don't
Well, no,
wanna do
but
that.
again, but again, that's why they're low, right? Is to get people to pay.
Right.
If they ask for
They're-
$1
they're-
million,
they're-
like people.
right. Right. So at any rate, there was
Good
some
business
interesting
plan.
points about that. Anyway, that's what I had. If there are any questions, I'll take those.
I just want to say I'm glad you're doing the cyber hygiene assessment. Thank you.
Oh.
That's good. I mean, you may not be glad you're doing it, but
Well,
I'm glad it's in there.
The
I attended one of those meetings 18 months ago, maybe, when Holy
CISA,
Cross talked about their experience, and so.
we have that, the menu of services that they presented. And of course, after this meeting, I was going to say, well, do this and this. And then when I attended the meeting, I was the only one at the meeting that had, that was in the scheduling portion of it with CISA. But there were two that had been through it, and they said, just do the whole thing. He said, you'll be surprised at the silly stuff they find. Like, they went out to substations with these folks,
Right.
and they walked up to the substation, and the guy didn't even get out of his car. He said the hinges are upside down.
Yeah,
You
someone
could just
could
lift the
it
gate
right
off and walk in the substation.
Right. Yeah, that's
He
kind
goes,
of,
and we've used that gate for 5 years and never even noticed it. Where you have to have them opposing so you can't lift it out of the. Anyway, so we're in the middle of that, but I know it'll be several events in several days. So, but yeah, it'll be a good event.
any more questions for Joe? Okay, we have a little bit of an update on that line.
Yeah, I asked Don to check on that line that you asked me about. And apparently the line is still in pretty poor shape, not very good access. The last time, I believe it was trees, and we had threatened to cut them off. I have to go back and research some of that. A lot of that was pitch handled, that part of it. And so we will.
Let's have to maybe cover that a little more in executive session. That's whether we need to
Determine what we have to do with that one.
we have that in there for that. All right, Jessica.
So you have my report. The only update I have is on the work comp cost containment program through the state of Colorado. We did qualify for a 5% discount on our work comp premiums from the state, and that is based on our workers' compensation experience, so lost time accidents, that sort of thing, and our safety program itself. So we have to respond with a full review of what we do for safety.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
And the only other reminder I have for you all, every board meeting, if you can, click on your board documents and hit the refresh button at the top. So as we update the documents in here, you actually need to update your call to order for it to grab the new board document. So I'll keep reminding you guys for a while to do that, so you have the most up-to-date documents. So any questions on my report?
Mark has a question.
Down on your report, and I don't know if or we need executive session, it falls under your shop. Employee turnover here.
Yeah, I think we're gonna discuss
We're
that.
discussing that, okay.
Executive
I just
session.
want-
Yeah, that's under personnel. Executive session. Okay,
Carl,
Carl,
Jessica, can you, or maybe Levi will have to do this, this reasonable suspicion stuff? What is reasonable suspicion?
So that is part of.
I mean,
the-
this seems like could be carried away, the way you explained it here in this.
So reasonable suspicion is a testing requirement under Department of Transportation regulations. It's included in our drug and alcohol testing policy. And the best practice would be that all supervisors and managers are trained on what reasonable suspicion looks like for someone under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And that's what CREA. will
So it
be
only
teaching.
applies to driving or,
It applies to all employees. It is under DOT, but we have it in both policies.
so if I look at you and say, geez, you must be drinking or something, is that
why
reasonable
we're having
suspicion?
training.
Not exactly.
Not exactly, that's
No.
what I'm,
Yep, so there are certain parameters around it. They're a little different for drugs and for alcohol. And the training goes through what you look for to determine if someone is reasonably suspicious for drugs or alcohol.
And CREA is putting on
CRA is
this
putting it
training.
on. And they're reviewing our drug and alcohol policies specifically before the training. But then they'll do the general.
so what do you do when that happens? You report it to the general manager and then it's up to his discretion to have it tested or? If
Okay, not
I accuse
exactly.
you of doing this, is it automatically,
It's automatically nothing. So
it's automatically nothing?
you get tested. If you're following the parameters of the policy and what the DOT regulations are, then that person would get tested. And if they were negative, then that's the end of it. If they were positive, then you go down a different route, which is no guarantee. It depends a little bit on the situation. So that's what the training is about.
it's less frequent than you think that somebody says, oh, hey, look, Carl looks.
Well,
he's a little
it
up."
seems to me
Um,
that it's a
and-
thing that can be abused.
It could be, but it typically is not. It tends to fall on the other end to where that people are hesitant to say, you know, well, Carl looks like he's drinking, but, you know, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to get Carl in trouble. And so the training actually helps the supervisors and others to identify certain types of behaviors and characteristics so that they are hopefully making the best informed decision about that. And actually, I've been through it, you know, for several years in other places. And, you know, it was like every year we did the training.
Okay. Fair enough.
Anyone else? Thanks, Jessica. Rob,
Rob brought homework for you.
Yes, I have presents for everybody. In case you haven't heard, we're having an annual meeting on Saturday. And I have your director binders right here, so that you can navigate the meeting seamlessly.
At least that's the goal.
It's worked in the past unless you change something.
And if you want to see what the previous year's binders look like, Dick brought in 10 years worth in a box over here, so. If any of you have any-
Only 10?
I cleared out my office under orders from the boss. Your office has got too much stuff in it.
So I'll
You
just
brought-
go through
I
this.
brought you
To have it
Yeah.
recycled.
I'll just go through this with you quickly, just so you're kind of have a feel for what's gonna happen Saturday. But the first couple of pages, you should have the agenda, and it's all the preliminaries are what you would expect. We have an invocation, pledge of allegiance, national anthem. We'll thank the main sponsors. Mark will go through the housekeeping items, introduce the board, and he'll close the registration 10 minutes after Meeting starts, that's per our bylaws. He'll also show there is one change in the agenda. We're going to play the annual meeting video, which is the first time we've done this. It's been a collaborative effort with Mark's ideas. I worked on it. Raymond worked on it, our new employee, and Tri-State worked on it as well. And then we co-opted the talents, the audio talents, I should say, the voice talents of Don Finn, who's now leaving us. But if he ever needs to show what he's done at Mountain Parks, he'll have this video on YouTube, which we'll also post the day of our annual meeting. But I understand because we're using the OWL and YouTube that the audio on this might not be the best, but Joe says we might hear it if we're really quiet.
We're gonna try.
Okay, so we'll go ahead.
Where's my mouse?
Snow, rain, or wind. For more than 70 years, our crews are answering the call to restore power and keep the lights on. From our early days of electrifying north central Colorado, Mountain Parks Electric rises to the challenge of providing safe and reliable power no matter what comes. Now we are ready for the next generation of electric service. Preparing to create a more resilient power grid. Generating opportunities by providing financial assistance and rebates. Providing reliable, affordable, and increasingly renewable power.
Nice drone shots. Yeah.
Committed to those we serve. We are your neighbors, here to lend a helping hand and improve our communities, reaching our consumers in new ways, providing products and services that help you use electricity more efficiently. We are protecting the grid, making it more resilient against natural disasters, undergrounding power lines, hardening our system, and protecting wildlife. Powering all of Grand and Jackson counties, parts of Larimer, Routt, and Summit counties. We are Mountain Parks Electric, by those we serve.
There it is.
Nice
I'm sure
job.
we'll have a standing ovation after that.
Yeah.
No, so that's gonna be one of the things we do right before we actually officially start the meeting. The agenda, I just found out yesterday, has changed slightly again because Bryson won't be here, Levi will be. So after we do the video and close registration, Levi will get up and do his thing. He'll determine we have a quorum, we have a meeting, conduct business, proof of mailing. He'll make sure that the minutes from our last annual meeting are approved, then discuss the District 5 Director election results where Jeff ran unopposed, and then collect the 4 ballots for District 2 for those who have not already voted by mail that are in District 2. And then he will introduce the board-sponsored amendments 1 through 3 that allow us the option in the future to vote electronically. And so then we go back to Mark, and Mark has 3 segments in the meeting where we'll be doing audience polling with people using their cell phones. On their registration gift bag, we put in a QR code like you have at a restaurant when you scan and get their menu. So they'll scan that, and Mark has some fun audience polling questions. For those that participate, we'll put them into a drawing for one of the quarters of beef. So just by doing the audience polling, they'll qualify for that. So Mark will start out with the first 3 questions, then we'll do the community roundtable. Then we have have a second set of questions, and then Kent Singer from CREA will be moderating the industry roundtable. Then we have the third set of questions, then we announce our scholarship winners and our essay contest winners. The old business, the new business will be to discuss the results of the election, and then we'll go ahead and do the drawing prize. So, any questions on the agenda?
What are the polling questions?
Yeah, they are in here. Good question. So
Good
they
question.
are on your, you have a tab that says audience polling questions, and you can see them. So, we want to find out where everybody's from, how many meetings they've attended
No
before.
cheating on the third question.
On the third question?
Yeah, no, that's not telegraphic.
Oh, yes, okay. So I won't mention the third question, which is fun if you're watching on YouTube. And so some trivia kind of questions, but these questions are also meant for Mark to be able to inform our members of some of the products and services that we have in sort of a fun, interactive way. So those are the polling questions. So we've already tested it at the high school, and it's worked during our 2 tests. So we expect it to work Saturday at the annual meeting. And then following the annual meeting, we do have another EV test drive right there at the high school. So we're bringing our Tesla, of course. They're bringing the Ford electric van. It's going to be there, and I think there's a couple of other vehicles at least. So
The Nissan Leaf Police Edition,
yes.
the Mach-E Mustang. And one other one.
And so another nice opportunity for our members. But all the subsequent tabs after the agenda are kind of all the different sections of the meeting. So you can see who's on the round table. I also have in there the annual report, so you'll be able to see the minutes from last year, the red line changes the members are voting on are in the annual report. We'll also have the articles and the bylaws in there since we're voting on those. If you wanted to reference those are in there. As well as who won scholarships, what the prizes are, and who has RSVP'd as of yesterday. So that is all in there. Any questions on the binder?
Do you have to RSVP for the meeting?
No, you don't, but some people do.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, I hope we have a great meeting, and I'm sure you will. And we hope to see you. So, any questions on my report?
You confident we're gonna achieve quorum this year?
I think between the directors, the scholarship winners, and employees, the number of scholarship winners that have RSVP, I think we're close to 45 or 50 right there. So we need 100. We have done a significant amount of advertising, so it's in newspapers, it's on social media, of course, it's been in our magazine. So I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
I should have just started with the short answer.
Yes.
Yes, I do. And I would be, it would be wrong for me to not in my report by mentioning, since he's a short timer now, Don was a little disappointed this morning that nobody noticed his haircut. So at our next break, you might want to say a word about it.
Well, maybe they did and they just didn't want to say anything.
Yeah.
Right, right, that's right. Okay, thank you.
And as we discussed at the meeting last month, we were able to acquire 3 steers this year. And we are working with the 4-H clubs that do the livestock auctions in Kremlin and Walden to identify how we will be able to support those. We were able to get the 3 steers for a very economical price and help out a local rancher. So,
We have 11 quarters going.
we have 12 quarters and 11 are given away on that day, yes.
All right, any more questions regarding the annual meeting or any of that? All right, bills for payment. Any questions? Oh,
I have one
Jake
question.
has a question on the bills for payment.
Number 83639 says, Audit Workman's Comp Federated. About $13,000,
We have a work comp audit every year.
right?
And when we initially apply for work comp audit, we give them an estimate. We usually, provide them with payroll records. So the year we provided was quite a bit under what they ended up auditing because we had some personnel ads, personnel jobs that we had filled. I mean, at one point we were fully staffed, and that reflects it for last year. So
Okay.
there's additional premium there. So we've adjusted that in a few years, so we won't see that much.
Thank you.
That's why the work comp companies do the audit to make sure that what you reported was what actually happened, because the premium is based on that.
Any other questions?
Can you review again? Maybe it may, I didn't see who got the per diem. I didn't, but I was still reviewing. As soon as you sign our new,
As soon as Jeff signs it, we can go in and get it, yeah.
Yes.
If
Is
we
it-
did, you're
So
all-
they've been signed, everyone except for Jeff's, and Diane was working on it. But.
from
the
last
resol-
month, so,
Yeah.
because I didn't see mine, I haven't seen it.
Right, it hasn't, I just signed.
Liz
them.
had to sign them because Jeff was gone.
Yeah, so Jeff's gone, so I just signed those on Monday,
Okay, from last.
from last month.
Okay, I was just,
So-
I was wondering if I
so,
did
and-
something wrong.
And it's possible if, well, let's see, yeah. At the
Yeah,
end of May.
includes all,
Yeah.
Carl's wasn't in there, his was, but I proved his.
Yeah.
Jeff is the only one.
Mm, that has- yeah, Exactly.
So
Okay.
she'll be cutting those checks today. If you get a hard check, you should get it, if you have ACH.
If you
I just want to make sure it wasn't me, which
Yeah.
was quite possible.
Typically, Jeff would review them in a more timely manner. Liz was not aware that he
Well, and
was.
I was out of town, even if Jeff, if I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Yeah.
So as soon as I
Okay.
found out.
I just want to make sure it just wasn't me.
Yeah, no, it's not you. And
Okay.
I've got to say, I think the new system, it seems like it would make the whole process easier to review it, because I was able to go in and look and sign, and seems like it should be slick after, yeah, much easier. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, let's, 10:33, let's go to board open forum and associated reports. Carl?
Had a tri-state meeting last week. Just some things that, other than the rehash that I sent to Mark, that he passed on to the board. One of the comments was about the judge in the CTP case. It's her first time to be a ALJ judge. They commented that she is very much different than the first one because she is listening to all the testimony, not asking questions. They said the last judge spent all his time asking questions, didn't leave much time for the lawyers. So they expect the ruling not until the first quarter of 2023. The rating agencies were contacted, and Fitch and Moody's rate Tri-State stable. Standard & Poor's rates us negative. One of the things that Dwayne brought out is the fellow G&T CEOs had a meeting and are very supportive of the stranded asset resolution and very critical of how NRECA handled the situation in Nashville. So there's a lot of hullabaloo over that, and I think did you just send out an email asking for more comments on that resolution, or was it a different one?
Well, the comments on the Nreca resolutions, I haven't gone through all of them at this point. I don't know what was in there.
Okay. And the railroad contract for hauling coal from Powder River to Springerville in Arizona increased by 20 million bucks. And Mike McBride, they brought this up. Mike McBride has did an analysis of Kit Carson, United, and DMEA, especially Kit Carson and DMEA, and I think they presented that to you guys in a meeting at some point in time, but what is being reported in the newspapers and what is really actual are totally different. And I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
My only comment would be that I think that while it's a very interesting analysis, that Mike's analysis has some flaws.
This
Well,
is
I don't
analysis
know.
of what?
I haven't seen it.
The analysis of the savings that were obtained by Kit Carson and DMEA after they changed from Tri-State to Guzman. And he did it without the assistance of them, basically using their publicly available financial statements. And I think that there's a lot of good information in there, but it's really difficult to do a thorough analysis when you can't actually get into the data. You're just
You
using
don't
what's
know
available.
what they front loaded and what they didn't
Yeah.
front load.
And I mean, that's the challenge whenever you're trying to analyze something like that, is that, you know, if you don't have access, so for instance, we'll use the word comp audit. You know, they come in, they can look at whatever they want to look at. And so it's fairly easy for them to come to a result. If all you're doing is looking at reports maybe that were filed with the state of Colorado, it's a little more difficult to do that. But he did put a lot of work into it. And
Do you have the analysis?
it was done at one of the managers' meetings. And
So it's not, wasn't distributed.
No. But if they talked about it at the board meeting, then it should be on the MIC. I can get onto the MIC.
They said it wasn't, but they were gonna try to get it out to the board members of Tri-State at least.
Okay. I can reach out to Mike and see if he is willing to share it, and then I can provide it to the board.
Okay. I'd be curious to look at it. I don't know that I believe it or not believe it, but I'm just curious to see.
Well, I think the one thing with a lot of analysis that people do is that there's 100% chance that it's not right. It's probably a little bit less, a little bit more, but it's not exactly what they came up with. I mean, it's really difficult to be exact.
And those co-ops who did that would be the ones in the position to know exactly how it's turning out.
Yes, I mean, I think he started with DMEA, and at the request of one of his board members, because there were a number of articles in the area, and what DMEA's press releases said, his board member, who was a DMEA member as well, did not think that the press release was accurate, that it may have put a better spin on things than were the case. And so that's what prompted Mike to go through the analysis. And his analysis was that things were not as were reported in the newspaper.
Wait, who's Mike with?
Mike is
PCEA.
yeah.
Any,
He's their CEO.
any other questions for Carl?
Carol, and you mentioned that Tri-State has concerns and doesn't think its PPA suppliers are going to come through. What's the next step there? Do you go next down on the list?
I
to
don't,
people who
I
need the word?
don't know until that happens, actually. I don't know what the next step will be. I mean, it's speculation at this point because of the supply chain and the issues with Vietnam and China being accused of dumping goods in Vietnam to.
Do you know when construction is slated to start?
I don't offhand, I can find that out, but
I believe
I'm thinking it would come online in 2023 or 2024.
Right, I think
They
that
were staggered.
a number of projects and they were scheduled to be coming online over the next couple of years. And I don't believe that they could just go to the next project because they went through the process and they vetted all of the proposals that they received and they selected the ones that they believed fit their needs the best. And so I don't know that you could go back, and that was a year or more ago. And so I don't think you could go back to the next one. I would expect that if they aren't able to fulfill what they had wanted to, then they would need to go back out for an RFP and get additional submissions. Or look for opportunities where somebody is building something that they could potentially get a piece of.
Yeah. Carl, I have a question. You mentioned the ratings. They went to the rating agencies and asked, was that prior or post United giving their notice of withdrawal? Did they do that before United's?
Before.
Because United and Northwest Rural Public Power just gave new notices to withdraw.
United's
from
thing
Tri-State.
just came out.
Right.
This was when they were back in Washington for the FERC hearing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Initially, so it was before
Before
the
that.
United announced.
And I think in our PPDs was after United, but very close.
Right.
They're
Yeah.
tiny though, so.
Yeah.
So it was Moody's stable and S&P negative. Is that consistent with what they were, or is that a change?
I think Standard & Poor's has been negative pretty much for quite a while, so with all the disruption of members.
Yeah.
The other two, I think, is a little bit upgraded, honestly. but
Yeah,
don't know if you
I
want-
believe that S&P changed their rating to negative late last year. And I think that Fitch and Moody's have been in the stable range for at least all of this year, which obviously there's not a whole lot of this year. But they have had at least one review this year of the rating and still maintained it at stable.
And then those coal transport increase costs, is that likely to have, is that like an annual cost, or is that over the course of a contract?
It's a contract that was just, I guess, I think expired, but it was increased by $20 million. Now, I'm sure it's over a period of time. It's not, a $20 million 1 year deal.
This week?
Yeah,
This week?
Next week.
It's over a period of time.
And I think,
Probably the
yeah.
Springerville plant, I think, is life expectancy 2050.
And
So,
and it's the result, I think, of increased transportation costs, which we're seeing across
yeah,
the market. And when you sign the contract, obviously they're going to do it at the current rate. And so it's going to cost you more.
Right. And do you have any idea what percent of that, what percent that was of the total contract value? Like, did it go up 5% or 10%? Do
you
you
mean
have?
of the cost of coal?
No, not the coal, just the transportation
million.
contract. Was it a $100 million contract that went up 20
They
million, or
didn't
was
really
it?
say what the,
Okay.
and I didn't ask that
Okay.
question.
I was just
what
trying to
the-
figure
what
out the
the-
scope
yeah.
of it.
Whether it was a 30%
Right.
increase or 10% or 1%, I don't know.
Buffett's just raising the price of his trains, that's all.
Yeah.
But I believe that what
Those engineers.
we've seen recently is that it's, typically at least a 10% increase in the price.
I would assume so too, or they wouldn't have probably brought it up. so.
And Mark, do you have any idea what percentage of transportation, what percentage of the coal cost is transportation?
Again, the answer is it depends, because.
But
the
I
whole
mean,
thing
yeah,
is
it depends on
trans-
how far
yeah,
the plant is
right.
from the.
And typically, the transportation cost of the coal is, I would say, 15 to 20% or less of the price per ton of coal. Because as if you watch the commercials for the trains, they say that they can move a ton of freight for $1. That was probably before the price of diesel went up, and so it probably costs more than that now. But typically, the transportation cost of the coal has not been a significant portion of it.
I would hesitate to say that it's a little higher than that percentage because it has to go all the way to Arizona.
Yeah, I was gonna say that
from northern
particular
Wyoming.
coal has to travel.
And there's been some issues. The coal supply at Springerville has been depleted pretty much, so they have enhanced trying to get coal back in, and the railroad's been balking at it, saying you've got a contract for delivery X, X, and X. We're not changing.
Oh, it's complicated.
How's the water situation at Springerville? I mean, they're pulling groundwater, right? Is that looking stable?
They own, yeah, some surfaced and groundwater. Yeah. But no, that's not an issue. They have, when they build the plants, they secure the water, make sure it's there.
As we
for
know,
the-
water is overcommitted in the West.
Oh, I
so-
can't argue, but they bought, just like Craig and everywhere else, they bought private water rights, and
The physical supply is there.
yeah, so the supply is, pretty secure.
Carl, did they ever do anything with the water rights for that, was it Kansas, where they were gonna build that plant?
That's being evaluated right now, is to get the same with Southern Colorado, whether to sell all that.
Build a pipeline.
Well,
Get into
it's
the
up in
water
the air,
business.
but probably with all that land and
That's what
everything
the
else will
transmission of water.
be sold.
Because the water rights were significant.
They are at every generation plant. Yes. There's, already speculation that the Craig, when that goes down by 2030, what Tri-State's gonna do with that water, because it's on the Colorado River, and so what they're
Be
gonna do
valuable.
with it is,
If they're gonna make hydrogen, they're gonna need some water.
huh?
If they're making hydrogen out there or ammonia, they're gonna need some water.
Well, and that's, another concern, honestly, to get the green hydrogen or the blue hydrogen or whatever the color, the best color is, takes water, not
Right.
natural gas.
Right.
And as short as of water as we
Right,
here on the
right.
west,
It's maybe not.
where the hell are they?
Well, yeah, I was curious about like the cooling. It doesn't matter. We're getting in the weeds. Okay, here we go. Dick, any more? I guess we should have everybody done with Carl. Dick, Western United.
Western United, well, the board adopted a budget of $189 million in sales. They have a backlog of close to $70 million in orders, and a lot of that is a year and a half out on transformers. Their cable cutting operation has now started. They finally have the piece of machinery calibrated and working. So you can now, instead of buying just a whole spool, you can order to length. So which helps in not having excess. Aside from that, their St. George facility, there's construction going on. And they're not quite sure of a final date. They're having, as with everything, permitting scenarios with the local government. Local governments are working very slowly. But aside from that, they're having a wonderful time. I am acting treasurer. They will have their new election, I believe it is, in their August meeting. And That's all for those guys.
But I thought you were elected treasurer. so
I was
it
appointed because
Okay.
the gentleman who, from Southeast, who left Southeast Board, he was secretary. The secretary became the treasurer became the secretary, and they appointed me acting treasurer until they have the formal election.
Okay.
And
And you're up for election for that, right?
as long as I make it through Saturday, yes.
You're a good actor.
Yeah, yeah. Never know.
Any questions for Dick? Okay, any other board reports? Okay, I've got a couple, GPAC met to discuss member engagement on Tuesday, and they moved to nominate 2 new committee members, Alicia James and Kristen Sprons. I will ask for a motion accepting them as new committee members under emergency business. The GPAC discussion centered on member engagement, communications with members. These are green power donors that we're talking about when I say members. Growing the number of members in the program and the amount they contribute, and how to make the entry into the program frictionless. A specific ask was that we, as sort of a board and the co-op in general, have refrained from using emails to communicate with our members unless it's, hey, your bill's ready or whatever, but we've been very judicious in not using emails and not deluging our members with things. But GPAC is asking that we consider allowing them to reach out to GPAC members through like an e-newsletter quarterly, perhaps, that they would work on to tell a story about GPAC and what's being done with the monies, and to try to make the contributors more engaged with the program and feel more appreciated. Right now we do an annual report, but it's kind of thick and it doesn't really tell a story. So they would like this board to consider, if staff is on board, sort of, would that be okay to do that for a year or so and see how it goes? Make sure it's not, it would have an opt-out and all of that. So that was something that I throw out there for.
What were
Any
the 2
thoughts on
names of
that?
the new folks?
Kristen Sprons and Alicia James, and I'll give more information about them when we get to emergency.
I'm just gonna look at the spelling. if you don't mind.
Any questions on that or thoughts? Okay. The rate design committee, geez, when was that meeting? In April, I went to that meeting. Really, it was decided to use the existing A40 rate design with sort of a new cost of service informing the inputs to that rate design. So that's what we're on right now. There's a large spread between the A40 and a FERC-based rate, which they also presented at that meeting. The committee also looked at rate designs of other FERC-regulated GMTs. Some were more complex and had sort of a base demand charge that protected those GMTs, decreased their risk if members shifted load or they had less load to sell. The demand is sort of their demand became less important because of the way they structured their demand. They designed their demand billing. The committee did not take a deeper dive into any of those rates. We just stuck with the A40, looked at the FERC one, and United had a proposal that the committee didn't take a deep dive into that either. The next meeting will involve a discussion of tilt. So that again is the percent of revenue captured from demand-related charges and the percent for energy. And more tilt makes the average cost per kilowatt hour closer between members, even though those members might have really some might have high demand use, and low energy use, and others might have low demand and high energy use. So it brings the price per kilowatt hour, total revenue we pay divided by kilowatt hours, closer by member to member. I asked that, and Springer has also asked that it be looked on a KW basis to see the range that people are paying for demand in relation to total revenue, because we're always trying to push that energy into average. Well, when you do that, the demand springs out. So the differences in demand are greater. So we're going to have.
I'm sorry, you said tilt? What does that mean?
That's tilt. So tilt, some people might refer to tilt as subsidy. So if you have a rate or design that captures all the costs that are associated with demand, that can decrease the energy cost, the pure energy cost. So, but for a co-op that's like heavily uses a lot, their demand is high, but they have a low load factor, so the energy use is low. When you take the total amount that they pay for their power bill and you divide it by the kilowatt hours, you're going to have a high price per kilowatt hour. So it might be come in at 10 cents, 12 cents.
Yeah.
Conversely, someone else might have a high load factor. And okay, so tilt is saying, you know, geez, we really don't want that member who has the high demand charge and the low energy. We want to tilt it a little so their average cost is more in line, 7 or 8 cents. And to do that, you de-emphasize the demand end of it and emphasize the energy cost. Now that is really where the two things that we discussed, FERC versus the existing A40, different. If you look at the FERC philosophy, it's cost causer, cost payer, and a lot more of that is shifted to demand. So this rate design committee, we have often said, we have been told that if the whole membership can agree on a rate and no one opposes it, then maybe that amount of tilt will fly. If someone opposes it and the tilt is really different, it could shift more towards the FERC model, so the demand could be much heavier. And I think it's important for us to realize that it doesn't have to be a member. It could be a really big user that has a high load factor who can oppose that. It will go the rate. I asked if the rate was going to be effective immediately or within FERC's timetable, or whether they were going to ask to not make it effective until FERC approved it. The intent is it would go into effect subject to refund once they file it. And that means that there could be, if it gets challenged, Tri-State could be on the hook for refunding, which could create some uncertainty. All I can say, so next meeting is, so we'll discuss the tilt, try to decide on what that tilt looks like. So part of that is just looking at their revenue and saying, you know, we're going to get 40% from demand and we're going to get 60% from energy. And within the demand component, so much is transmission and so much is generation demand. Carl's been through that. He could explain this. He's already been through it. So we're going back and looking at all the work you guys did in that report. But the tilt, that's a subjective decision unless it's opposed at FERC, then it becomes something that's argued over and the cost inputs become very important. I would say that's as we talked, it's a issue that it is subjective.
But when we just underwent all of this wonderful training on
Right.
cost of service, so
you're right, and during that cost of service training, the instructor said, yeah, we worked with this co-op and the service availability charge really, when you ran the numbers, should have been $40 a month. And so the board put it in place, and then he got a call from the new board, and they lowered it. So there is that art, I think, of really looking. I mean, if we were to try to assign absolutely every cent that each member cost us, our rates would, everybody would have an individual rate. We just talked about fiber, and is it $79.99 for the people in Laramie River, or is it $18,000 for them and $25 for the people in Winter Park? You know, it's that same, how do you make things work, what's fair? So that's the first discussion in that rate design committee meeting that is on the 24th and 25th. The second one is what metrics should be used for capturing the demand component for billing. Right now, we have our coincident peak during Tri-State's peak period, and that is for transmission and generation. Should they be different? Should it be a 12-month running peak for transmission? So there's going to be a lot of looking at load profiles. There's concern about load shifting, whether it actually saves Tri-State money if people shift off peak, or are they just shifting those costs onto other co-ops? So that's the second part of that rate design discussion.
So after all that's decided, then we can decide whether we do a rate study or not.
Well, so I guess my conclusion, what I've come to conclude in all of this is that this process and the FERC regulation, we should get used to the fact that our rates are going to be uncertain. We aren't really sure how. We'll have some certainty, but we don't know if they're opposed. We may have certainty for the first year until there's a settlement on that rate, and then that rate could change, that design could change because FERC says so. Or perhaps Tri-State settles, and then they have to file a new rate within 12 more months. So I think that in the past, we had some, you know, especially after the A40 went into effect, we had an idea of how that design was going to work. And we knew that they might increase it or decrease it as they did, but we didn't think, oh my God, there's going to be a 30% change or 40% change in the demand, which, you know, that's a lot, but there's a huge spread between those two designs. And I think Mountain Parks is situated well because we are not one of those really low load factor co-ops, and we're not one of the really high load factor co-ops. So we kind of sit in the middle there. But it does create, oh, I'd have to go back and look at the, I ran some of the numbers to see how different scenarios would affect us. And the gross didn't really change, but what changes is who's driving those costs for us. But the overall amount that we pay doesn't change that much. But you should probably run the numbers because I'm not a professional at it. But I just think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and we're going to have to figure out how to read it and provide some certainty to our members.
We'll have to learn to manage the uncertainty.
Right,
And
exactly.
I mean, one of the big things with the CTP and the last contract committee was, you know, there were certain co-ops that said, you know, we don't want any subsidy. You know, if this person leaves, you know, they have to pay a certain amount because we don't want any subsidy. What people tend to not remember is there's already subsidy, and it's built into the rates.
Subsidy.
And so I think that's the challenge, is you figure out the subsidy that everybody can live with, and not that there is no subsidy, because it's not really a possibility that you're going to come up with something that doesn't have a subsidy for somebody. And to your question, Dick, about the cost of service, we have in our budget to do a cost of service this year. the challenge, as we talked about a few board meetings ago, is that we could go ahead and do it, but then we don't know what the change is going to be come September of 23 when they change their rate. And so we could then be looking at making another change at, so make a change in January of 23, make another change in January of 24. And so my recommendation would be that we not do the cost of service this year, because if we do, we'll have information, but we won't necessarily be able to implement it without knowing what Tri-State's going to do.
Right, but doesn't their format allow for these changes? In other words, if Tri-State's rates change, can't they be plugged into the whole scenario with all the, in other words, they're gathering all of our information. But if Tri-State changes its rate, they should be able to plug that
I
in.
think you're right in some regards, but I think that if you game that out and say, okay, well, now we can plug this in. Okay, we've plugged it in. We decide to change our rate design a little bit. That gets opposed at FERC. 12 months later, that design is different. We plug it in again. We're going to have some whiplash for our customers, I think, our members. And so we have to think sort of the long game. This is creating uncertainty. Do we try to, each time there's a change, allocate that amount to our members and change everything? Or do we just say, okay, how are we going to manage this and not give our members this whiplash as things go on, and do it in a way that protects our finances?
Well, last time we had a rate study, it said we should charge, our facility charge should be X.
Yeah.
And we never went to X.
Right.
It was always much lower. And judging from the way things are now, it's probably going to come back even higher. And that then turns around and you have to take that difference and apply it back. And that's
Well, and that's the decision that the board made when, let's just say that the consultant came in and said it should be 33 and board said, no, we'll keep it at 29. That's tilt.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You are looking at it and you're saying, we recognize that there should be a change, but we're going to leave it the way that it is. And so there is some subsidy as a result of that. But there's always going to be, obviously you try and minimize that as much as possible. Your example of, the fiber and telephone and electric in rural areas, there is subsidy because it costs more to provide electric service to that person that Carl mentioned, that's 40 miles away than it does to provide service to somebody at Winter Park. But you take that and somewhat even it out. And so there's subsidy of the people in Winter Park to that guy that's 40 miles off.
So can I ask a question? So you mentioned managing uncertainty, and I think co-op board as the co-op model of serving all members, kind of levelizing costs. The PUC is that body, investor on utilities and ESCOs, but dealing with FERC, where you mentioned cost causer, cost payer, and managing this uncertainty. Do they have any sort of consideration when we make these rulings as to the effect if it's going to be drastic? We're going to suddenly charge, a whole lot more for demand. Do they say to themselves, well, we can't do that immediately? It's going to be phased in over time. What do they do?
And that is with any regulatory body, including FERC. They look at, cost causer, cost payer, and just and reasonable rates. They come up with those. But the flip side of that is public interest. And so they look at it and they say, okay, if we make this change, this group's rate is going to go up by 52%. That's not in the public interest. So what they may do is have some type of phase in, or they may say, what, we're going to have their rate go up 26% and recognize that it's not necessarily cost causer, cost payer. It may not be just and reasonable, but it's going to smooth it out. And with the Alaska Public Utilities Commission, when I was there were a number of those instances where they looked at it and they said, realistically, the rate should be $50. Well, well, it's $25 right now, so that's big change. So we're going to allow the utility to change it by, $5 a year for 5 years. And we're going to take the amount that they are not collecting and put it into a regulatory asset that they get a rate of return on. Now, that this is if somebody is a rate-based rate of return utility, which most co-ops are not. And that way they will be able to collect that or basically defer that money and collect it into the future. And it starts to get layered on the farther you go. But the problem or the challenge with most co-ops is they are not rate-based rate of return. They are more of a tier base, which is times interest earned. And so that's the challenge that you've got is we typically don't have regulatory assets that we get a return on. And so if you don't do it today, you probably are not going to do it, tomorrow. And you're just going to, get to a point where you're comfortable with what you do and the fact that there will be some subsidy in it. But typically the answer to your question is it in the public interest? And that is extremely subjective. But that's what they deal with. And
That's what they argue about in Washington.
yeah, and they will, they'll sit there and they'll say, the rate should be $10, but it's currently $2. Can we allow that to be such a huge increase? And typically the answer is no, and they figure out a way to be able to implement it in the public interest. Now, I will tell you, as members of the public, they will typically disagree over what's in the public interest. So,
Right, your public interest is different than my public interest. Okay,
and I guess as for the CRA update that Jeff would have done, I sent out to the board, the CRA board minutes, the updates and notes and things like that. So if you have any specific questions, I will try and answer them, or I will get you an answer.
okay, one other question that's gonna, I think, come up, Carl, when you were on the rate design committee, I know it came up. And the question was, should the rates on the Eastern Interconnect be different than the Western states rates? And should there be 2 rate classes? I know that this is going to come up at this next meeting. I'd be interested to know if any of you feel strongly about a position I should take on this issue. And you probably are most informed about it.
I don't know that I have a feeling one way or the other right now. That's what NPPD's issue is there's no generation, there's no nothing the tri-state provides on the Eastern Interconnect. It all comes from basin down, and then we just pay basin this way. So and the tilt or the socialized costs for everyone. I don't know that I have really a position on it.
Some co-ops like Highlight.
Both.
Yeah. So what's the highlights position?
You'll have to ask Highlight.
You probably can't disclose that. Okay. No one feels strongly about this. All right. Old business.
You mentioned you wanted
Yeah, that's,
on the committee.
yeah, we've got a couple, do we have new business, old business, new business, and emergency business? So is there old business or new business first?
Under open forum.
One thing.
forum.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
You go
sorry.
ahead first.
I've had contact with a couple of members. A rumor is quelled, it was from Grant County Commissioners, the potential commissioner, Randy George. The rumor of rolling brownouts.
Yes, that was Commissioner Manguso. I think it's how you pronounce her last name. She at a Grand County Builders Association meeting said that there were going to be rolling blackouts or brownouts in Grand County. I reached out to her and I asked, where she got this information from, because we were not aware of it. And we had several phone messages and text messages back and forth. And I said, that I was aware that Tri-State in a couple of forums had discussed rolling blackouts, and that it was in the, I guess, the I-25 corridor, and that they were looking at, or they were talking about the fact that Excel and others might in the summer with the demand for air conditioning might have that, but we were not aware of and that any effect in Grand County for that. And she responded back that it was a tri-state comment that she was referring to, and that she, just took it to be everywhere.
And was it a tri-state comment about Excel or a tri-state comment about Excel, about their loads and?
It was a
transmission
tri-state
congestion?
comment about that area and
By whom?
more particular.
Tri-State. Because I've never heard this at Tri-State. They've never mentioned it.
I think Dwayne in one of our managers meetings, that's where he meant that. So that's why I knew that he wasn't talking about tri-state. That, Excel, the IOUs basically that serve areas
So
in that I-25 corridor, that, were going to potentially have generation shortages. And what that was going to mean was they were going to have to potentially either buy power, and if they couldn't buy the power, they were going to have to possibly, and this wasn't necessarily a for certain thing, they would have to do rolling blackouts. And that Tri-State currently does not foresee any problems with them serving their load. And so none of the Tri-State members would have an issue with this. And so after back and forth, she said, yeah, okay, well, then I'll stop saying that.
The rumor was out, and this is what medical guest ranch, they run all electric kitchen.
Yeah.
Right during, and Justin can identify with this going, if it's during a peak guest week, sorry, I can't feed you. We're all electric.
Was that?
So
right?
that came up, and I threw a bigger point because he was running for county commissioner, and where these rumors get started. And he asked me, I said, I don't know, but I will try to find out for you.
Yeah. And we have, we didn't address it in communications to the whole membership because hopefully it was a somewhat contained comment, and we addressed it directly with the commissioner so that hopefully she would stop saying that.
Okay, good. And I'll pass that on to members. in
And
the
I mean,
district.
if the members that you talk to want to talk to me, feel free to
Good.
let them talk to me. And, we have not been informed. We have no plans to do any kind of rolling blackouts anywhere. And as we did with the stuff in the winter, what we would normally do is it would be an hour. And, I don't believe that there's a situation that we would potentially have to
I
put
don't see
people
that in the
for
summer.
multiple
That's
hours.
That was for the gas issue,
Yeah.
not
I know.
because of
Yeah.
electric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
California is the only one that has announced so far that I know of about the possibility of rolling
I've heard that a little
brownouts
bit
through the summer
again.
because of lack of generation capabilities.
Yeah.
But
And
it's never been mentioned at Tri-State.
Yeah.
One way.
the IOUs, I think part of it is they have two options if they don't have the generation. They either do the rolling blackouts or they notify their members that it's going to cost a lot more, like the winter storm.
Or they could do demand response.
Yeah.
Right, but, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, but even sometimes demand response is not enough to.
If they have no program set up.
Yeah. And some of them, I know Excel has one, but I don't think it's sufficient depending on how much the load is. And so, it's unfortunate, but sometimes people hear something and then they run with it. And to my knowledge, based on the discussions that Dwayne had with us, there was never anything that was said about any area outside of I-25, and it was not anything related to Tri-State.
But that's, I would pass that on to that member.
And we did communicate back to the Builders Association and let them know that that was not the case, so that hopefully they would not be out sharing with people that there was going to be a problem.
Second, I had another, and I don't know, bring this up, another, Mike, you dealt with this, a disgruntled member on locate service
Yes,
regarding.
in the
Regarding-
area of the Kremlin Airport, yes.
Yep. So I had about an hour long discussion with him the other night. And his main concern, I'm still not sure I got to the bottom of it, but he's a good co-op member, but he's concerned. On locate, is it our policy that we stop locates at the meter? Or are there any exceptions?
No, the issue that he has is we do locates of our service. There are member-owned services, and in the past, when we had a locate individual that worked for us, he would go beyond that, and he would sometimes locate other services that are owned by a member. And that particular individual that you talked to said, you know, we're not being friendly because we're not doing that. It's not our responsibility. And the company that we have that does the locates for us, they locate our services. They locate for Excel and others. And what Don had another member or two that contacted us, and we responded to them. Don sent them the information that there are other people that can do the locates of your owned services. And, you know, but there is a cost associated with it. And we gave them names of people that can do that. That particular member that you spoke with doesn't want to pay for the locate service. And so he believes that we should continue to do it. We should never have been doing it because we take on tremendous liability. If we're out there locating, we say, well, these are the only ones. And then someone comes in and they cut through somebody's sewer line or they cut through their gas line. And they say, well, Mountain Parks was located it. So, and we don't know where the stuff is. We know where our things are. And so it's easier for us to actually locate our services. And that's our responsibility. But that particular individual and a few other members have contacted us and they were not in quite the same position as that individual. But they were just saying, you know, well, how can we get these other services that we potentially own located? And we gave them an option of there are ward electricians or ward electrical and a couple of others. They can do this for you. They have the equipment. Yeah.
What's the company that we're? subbing
USI.
on? Okay. USI. But somebody.
USA or USI? I see, yeah.
Okay. A contract I have, yeah.
Did you
Somebody-
contract with someone?
No, I didn't contract with somebody, but somebody complained to me about, but it was not that company.
Yeah.
But they said they were also located, their primary, their secondary electric plus Excel. And so, but it wasn't that company.
Oh, so they got someone else to come in and do it.
Well, they called 811, but then
Yeah.
I guess they hit the line.
Yeah.
And then it was.
That's what happened here. They located, they broke the line anyway.
Yeah.
And they go, well, Mountain Parks Electric had just done that. They would have known from the
So it
ball,
was
from the transformer, we would have known.
from the transformer to the building or the use.
But an 811 call.
They're underground.
If I call 811 or anybody, the Mountain Parks Electric will be.
Located by USIC.
Okay.
To our service,
for our
centric to our
services.
meter.
That's
To
what I
our
thought I
meter.
said, yeah, there's a state center or something.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why we went to USIC is the person that did the locates for us retired. And we had to have actually an additional person to locate because part of it was we were doing these locates for these things that don't belong to us. And so we went to USIC. They are very responsive. When, you know, if someone calls and says, you know, hey, you know, you didn't do it right, Don contacts their regional person who sends the person right back out there. And they have done a very good job for us. And, you know, I understand that there are some members that are not happy because we don't do exactly what we did in the past. But, you know, this is, you know, back to that cost causer, cost payer. If you're going to do something and we need to locate it, the costs associated with that is we cover for our stuff, but for all of the other things that are there, we should not be doing that. And we take on additional liability that makes absolutely no sense for us.
That's kind of what I just want to make everybody else aware of it and then,
I've heard the same thing.
whatever, Paul.
You know, it used to be.
You used to,
You
you
used to do this and now they would locate it, the underground from the meter under our asphalt driveway up to the house. And it's like, well, yeah.
I guess it was a compliment to us that we did used to
Yeah.
do that, and they were really, really happy that
Yeah.
they did that, and they feel they deserve that as a co-op member, and I said, I'm pretty sure, me and Mark kind of, we didn't touch base, we barely touched base.
Yeah, we kind of.
But I
back
had
and
quite a
forth, yeah.
conversation with this individual.
The person I talked to complimented the one that Mountain Park sent out.
Oh, good.
But I guess there was one there at the same time, not doing that service that they did not like. So, but they were both driving like white trucks with blue lettering, he said, and so that's
kind of, I thought USIC,
USIC.
black lettering.
Blue, too.
Blue?
Yeah, so-
Okay.
Yeah. But it could be that Excel is
it was
contracting
Excel.
with them as well.
I'm sure it was the Excel side of
Yeah.
theirs that they were not happy with everything. But the Mountain Parks one, that's where they called the 811. Anyways, Mountain Parks, they were happy with whoever they had sent.
Any more issues?
No,
Other
that was my two issues of members on my end.
Anyone else have some?
Yeah, this one's quick. So speaking of misunderstandings, I've been in discussion over the last year or so with a lot of local builders up here about heat pump performance. Because increasingly folks are looking at efficient cold climate heat pumps, either to augment or to possibly replace gas. And, legacy 20, 30 years ago, heat pumps were not known to perform very well below freezing. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that knowledge has pervaded the building community who still may not be aware that one, cold climate heat pumps exist, and two, they are working here in the county. So I've been providing, builders and people who inquire about it with performance data on our heat pumps. For the record, they did really well. I mean, I used to live in a condo the size of a hotel room, and my energy bills were higher than in the whole house. And that's including all energy uses, not even looking at net metering. And that's in part because I went from electric baseboard in a poorly insulated home to, a new home that has heat pumps. So I bring this up because I think there is an opportunity for Mountain Parks, as we engage with members and the building community, to provide, better information about heat pumps. I can't guarantee that a heat pump is going to work on an existing home, but any home that's built properly to new construction specs in Grand County, we're almost all operating on the 2015 or 2018 energy code that has way bigger insulation requirements than, older homes used to be. It should be possible to do a cold climate heat pump up here. And then on that note, I did a little more research into the heat pump incentives that are being offered to fire victims in the Front Range communities. And all signs pointed to talking to Mitsubishi. So I will put Mark in contact with the folks that are offering some financial incentives there. And that is the type of system that I use on our house too.
Yeah, and I will tell you that at the CREA managers meeting with Don's presentation, he talked about a new type of cable that we are looking at using. And one of the other co-ops, said, well, we did that 20 years ago and we had all kinds of problems with it. Well, things have changed in 20 years. And it's better than it was 20 years ago. So
yeah,
It's also not quite as cold.
yeah. Well, and the thing is that, you're right that information is like, it doesn't work 20 years ago. So obviously it doesn't work today. Well, cars are a little different
Drills-
today than they were 20 years ago.
Battery powered drills are a lot better than they are now than they were 20 years ago.
Right.
So-
First impressions leave. You can
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah. It's like, you still got the cord?
Education.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and just on that note,
Mhm.
and I probably shouldn't even bring it up, but I was struck. If you watched any of the footage in Ukraine of the apartment buildings, almost all those apartment buildings had air source heat pumps on them. And they have had tremendous nuclear resources there. And so they have gas pipelines running through the country, but all those apartment buildings had. No, I think it was there.
Really?
Yeah. Because
There ought to
it's
be quite a
because
bit
they're all-
of info available from, what the hell's the name of this place down here by the river?
River Run.
Yes,
They've
but
got those pumps on
the
each one of
problem,
those.
the problem is, to Kristen's point, their construction standards related to some of those things. I mean, they set them on there and they're not insulated
They're
underneath.
manufacturing to the mobile home standard.
Yeah,
Which is
and
not the same
so
as.
if they had,
construction
if they had done some things, they would work much better than they're
So
seeing.
they have complaints or problems yet?
They've had some.
They will.
When it's
They will.
cold.
When Levi stayed there, like half the buildings had busted pipes.
Well, no, well, they just said, they asked me to trickle the faucet, so the
Yeah.
pipes didn't freeze.
Well, they, not an insult.
Yeah, they
My
aren't
understanding-
Sounds like
insulated.
old
My
time
under-
Fraser.
My understanding is that
Not
the
gonna, you know,
underneath
rebuild it.
where the pipes are not well insulated.
No, or at all.
Well, why would you?
They do everything 5 or
Doesn't get
6
that cold.
times.
So I don't
Okay,
think we have any
great.
old or new business.
Oh, emergency
well,
business. We
Yeah,
have
lunch,
emergency business.
lunch is not gonna be here until noon, so
Okay.
we've got 20 minutes.
Okay, let's go on to emergency business. Would you like to discuss?
You can
the-
start with the GPAC because that should
Okay.
be easy.
Okay, the GPAC, Alicia James and Kristen Sprons. Kristen works out at the Y. She is, I want to make sure I'm reading the right one. She was the marketing manager. Now she's the DEI manager. She's an active member of Grant County Tourism. She is very into relationship building, communication, and intentionality. And I believe I can carry those skills to this board as well as my marketing and storytelling skills. So she met with the chair of GPAC, Seth, and was super impressed with the work that GPAC's been doing, and she wants to be a part of that. So that's Kristen. Alicia is the assistant town manager at Winter Park. She has mostly focused on advancing affordable housing efforts for the town. And she previously was at the city of Brighton and worked on various sustainability initiatives. She has a master's degree in public education from CU Denver and has an undergraduate degree in political science and Spanish. She's very passionate about serving our community and advancing a transition to sustainability. Those two are Kristen Sprons and Alicia James.
And they can be from any district. We don't have to
They
worry about
can-
any of those.
Yeah, we don't have a requirement if you, again, I'll throw this out to folks. We have Barbara, who's up in Jackson County, but if you have folks who are interested in being on Green Power, both you and Mark, we can use more people from down there. I've talked to a couple, but people were too busy or nothing ever came of it. And so these are folks who are interested, want to get involved. So if you guys would.
Well, I heard a name that was interested in getting involved. River Valley. We'll see if I can. dig
Okay,
that up
that'd be
and send it
great.
to you.
And I think John Young at one time.
Oh, okay.
But then
Yeah.
I thought he's already had somebody in his district, so that's why I didn't.
Oh, okay.
But
So
it's-
John and what's his?
Paul.
Paul, yeah.
If they
Okay.
were interested. They would.
Okay, so I would write that down, the more the merrier. And whether it's on the committee, I mean, I think that this GPAC board is much more interested in getting volunteers together and making it more social and being out in public and holding events. So they're gonna need help, volunteer help.
So
Any emotion would be
Motion.
great, yeah.
Move to approve Sprons and James for inclusion in GPAC.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, I should say Kristen moved and Justin seconded. Yep,
Got it.
Okay, next one. The fiber construction contract.
So Scott, do you want to just give an overview of who and what?
So we solicited bid from 4 contractors. One of them being the current contractor that we're using bids ranged from 1.8 million all the way up to 2.6. There were two very close together down at the $1.8 million. And so Connexon, this is part of Connexon's process. We interviewed both of the two low bidders. And we decided to pick a company called Primoris. They do operate out of Denver. They have an office in Denver. I've seen them do some natural gas work. They do communication work for, I don't know if it's Comcast or CenturyLink, but they have experience with that. Very, very well presented contractor as compared to the second contractor who I'd never heard of, but you drive around Colorado, you'll see some of Primoris. It's PMC or something. You'll see the trucks around. So I was very confident that they can get the work done. Connexon, again, part of their process, adjusting some of the unit quantities. The final contract price on this one is 1.863 million. And we sent them a version of our own contract. And we went through a very short negotiation process between their attorney and Levi. They agreed to the contract that we have. Levi reviewed it. And so we were asking for award of this contract in the amount of 1.86 million. To Primoris.
And just a reminder to the board that with both the Green Power folks and this, we will have to ratify this next month, because as emergency business, we can do it as emergency business, but we need to ratify it the following month. And the reason that we are coming to you now is we just got the contract finalized, but they want to start on the 23rd, and we would like to get them started sooner rather than later.
Make a motion to accept the staff's recommendation of the bid for Primoris.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, Carl moved.
Just a second.
You spell Primoris.
Yes,
Primoris. And actually, the contract, their holding company, which is Future Infrastructure Analytics.
Okay.
Do I need to change the motion then?
No, I think you're good. Okay. And I don't think we have any other emergency business unless anybody has anything that they'd like to bring up.
should we go, what time is it? We're
Well,
close to
I'll
noon?
give a quick update. I gave some numbers for Mountain Family Center on where they were. I just got an email and it says that food pantry sent through April, compared 22 to 21, they're up 62% in usage of that. Senior grocery support, wellness support, which is not the food pantry, is up 181%. Utility assistance is up 8%. Senior transportation up 3%. The one category that's down is housing assistance. That's down by 37%. So they are still providing service, and it's needed more than ever, unfortunately, by the community. So
can they, or should they ask for help from our community fund? Normally, we give money out of the Operation Roundup, and then we do the totes separately. You know, if they have a need, suggest to them that they might make a request.
Yeah,
and see what happens.
I'll have a conversation with Helen. She will be at the annual meeting on Saturday, and we can talk about that. And typically, if they have something that comes up that they are struggling with, she and I will talk about it.
Okay, should we go into executive session and tick off anything?
But do we need a Mountain
Were we-
Parks Services
no.
meeting? I don't believe we do, but
Thanks for
We will
keeping
next
me on
month,
track.
right?
Right, next
Next
month we will.
Doing good.
okay.
Um,
And then, yes, I think it would make sense
Sense
to
to-
go into executive session.
And maybe we might change,
In the feed.
we could change a little bit of the order, but does employee housing timeline, Fraser Housing Project, capital credits for inactive members, litigation matters, and
You know, some of
partial requirements?
Partial requirements, King Mountain, and then
Okay.
that particular power line
Yeah.
issue.
You want me to write King Mountain in the motion?
No, member. I mean, I kind of
What's the-
look at that as litigation.
Yeah.
Buffalo Creek.
Buffalo Grove.
Buffalo Creek.
And it says personnel on here.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
and
personnel.
personnel. Yeah. So can I have a motion
policy
to go
B3.
into? policy
So
B3?
moved.
Oh, you're on it. You're on it.
Okay. And who needs
Sorry,
to
oh, the
second
capital
here?
credit.
Dick?
That's everything, Mark,
Yes,
that you'd added? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so hold on, I've
During the
got
meeting.
employee housing, Fraser Housing Project, capital credits for inactive members, litigation matters, partial requirements contract, policy B3. Is that it?
Buffalo
Buffalo Creek
Creek
And
rebuild
personnel.
and personnel.
personnel, and then the power line,
Yeah, and then
Issues.
the
customer-owned power line.
customer-owned power line,
Buffalo Creek, customer owned power lines and
personnel.
personnel.
Okay, read me what you have and I'll tell you. What.
All right, I have that Director Dick Leaf moved to go into executive session to discuss employee housing, the Fraser Housing Project, capital credits to inactive members, litigation matters, partial requirements contract, policy B3, Buffalo Creek rebuild, customer owned power lines and personnel matters.
That looks to me like we got it all. Is there a second for that? Mark Volt. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, let's go in.